from Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunchers for this week's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Basement. My name is Albert Padilla, and tonight we begin the much-anticipated Well of Souls chapter of Ready Player One, Chapter 6. This is episode 006, Part 1, More Than Meets the Eye. And tonight I will be joined by two very special guests. First, fighting out of the blue corner, you know him from podcasts such as Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Starling Tribune, and Better Podcasting, and now a Basement alum. Please welcome back to the show, Stargate Pioneer.
Wow, I'm fighting in the corner. Like, is this mixed martial arts? Is this boxing? Is this karate? I mean, give me a break here. What am I fighting?
See, I didn't.
It's Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah, that's probably the best analogy. I didn't know what your relationship was, Jeremy. I heard it was contentious, so I thought, well, let me just throw that in there and see if it sticks. So
yeah, he's really an abrasive person.
Yeah. And so also with us tonight, and this is someone from the home planet of Cybertron itself. So he's part of the Transmissions podcast, basically an everything Transformers show, and also the host of Yakko Yaks. And I hope I said that right. Please welcome the only person who can answer what the heck happened with the Michael Bay movies. Please welcome Jeremy Dennis.
Hi, how you doing? And
Good. How are you?
I don't think anyone can answer that.
No, we will have an answer, and we're going to get to that. We have to have a definitive answer on what the heck happened with those movies. So before we get started, I did want to give out just a quick shout out to one of our listeners, BC White, who I believe this morning, August 3rd, 2018, celebrated the birth of his new son along with mommy. He shared a picture in our Discord server, and all of them look very happy, very healthy, and absolutely beyond cute. So best wishes to you and your family, BC White, from all of us here at The Basement.
Indeed.
So Jeremy, no, that's a big deal. He's been stressing, I think, he's also a follower, I guess, or a listener of the Cantina cast. So he's a pretty big supporter of all of our endeavors here. So Jeremy, this is your first time on The Basement. So I wanted to ask if maybe you could just share your connection with the Ready Player One novel, when you picked it up, how many times you've read it, how much you've enjoyed it. And I'll need you to do that in 10 seconds or less at the count of 3. I'm kidding. You can have 60 seconds. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, according to Audible, I got it on November 18th, 2012. So I'm guessing that I got it prior to going on a Thanksgiving drive to visit family.
Yeah.
I'd heard about it on various podcasts since it came out. And I don't know why I didn't pick it up before then, but I don't have the actual paper book. I just have the audio book, and I listen to it at least once a year. And I just absolutely love it because of all the 80s mentions and everything in the book. It speaks to me on a very deep lever.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no, I would agree.
Yeah. And I actually didn't see the movie until like a month ago, whenever it was released on digital, and like there was a sale or something. I picked it up and watched it. And I knew it deviated from the book, so I went in knowing that it wasn't going to be exactly like the book, and I enjoyed the movie as well.
Yeah.
And just like seeing things in there, like the 18 ban and,
right.
Just all the little things that were added just strictly for the movie. It was just, eye candy.
Absolutely.
And I love them both. And like I said, I reread the book fairly frequently. I mean, it's in my regular rotation when I need a break from podcasts, and I go into Audible.
Well, that must be nice that you can take a break from podcasts.
I'm shocked. You can do this?
It's just, yeah. Sometimes you just run out of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. and better podcasting.
Right. Yeah, and unfortunately, I can't, divorce myself from the book because this is all I read as part of this podcast. So I don't know how many times I've read this thing. But that's great. Yeah, and the movie, I think I think SP's kind of shared his thoughts too, and I think they're pretty much in the same in line. Both the movie and the book are good in their own aspects, and they've got some things that are different but still cool. So, all right, well, that's kind of we'll jump right into the book. Really, I do want to level set a couple things here. Talk about the approach that we came up with Chapter 6, just given the amount of sheer pop culture references that are found throughout. Originally, we were going to take the references in order in which they were presented, that, the way Wade just kind of rattles them all off. But instead, we're opting to kind of spread them out over different genres of across all 6 parts. So Chapter 6 is going to be broken up into 6 parts. So, for example, tonight we will cover some authors. We've got 2 of the bands. There's a movie. We'll sprinkle some directors, and we're going to anchor the whole show on television and cartoons with Transformers kind of headlining the episode. So that's the plan. If we pull this off, I'll be very, very surprised. Now, the chapter opens with Wade drifting away in his Latin class, and he makes mention that he found a bug in the Oasis, the software itself, and it's allowed him to kind of exploit, his presence, and so he's able to kind of drift away and leave the class and access Anorak's Almanac, which we now know is James Halliday's tome of knowledge that housed all of his favorite authors, the movies, songs, TV shows, etc. And first up, we're going to talk about 3 authors. We've got Terry Brooks, Jack Vance, and Kurt Vonnegut. So, SP, I'm going to kick this over to you and kind of start off with this question. How much, if any, of the works of these authors are you familiar with, either in the novel form or in other medias?
Yeah, not so much with these 3 authors. And like with Terry Brooks, for example, with the Shannara series, I actually instituted a new TV viewing gatekeeping event here for me. And I will not start a new TV series until it has had 3 successful seasons. So it's 3 and done, or 3 and it ended well and it's going for a 4th. So I did not pick up the series Shannara because
you are a very wise man.
But
you've been burned too many times.
Exactly. Defiance, just recently, Defiance, The Expanse, Alphas, Caprica, all on Sci-Fi, all unceremoniously canceled. Terra Nova, which we'll talk about later. I mean, I just didn't get into it because of that, because I don't want to waste my time. There's so much good content out there elsewise. I don't want to waste my time on series. Now, if I hadn't watched The Expanse from the beginning, I would have missed out on an incredible series. I know I talked about it last time, but since last time I have watched all of season 3. It is amazing. I can't believe where they ended season 3. If you have not picked up The Expanse, you need to, because it ends in such an amazing place with a ton of possibilities. So it's really good. So I didn't get into Shannara. Jack Vance, honestly, you stumped me there. And I looked into the guy and I had not heard of any of his works. So I guess I'm a bad sci-fi geek because I didn't know him. But at the same time, I looked at his works and there's not much remarkable there. Now, everybody's heard of Kurt Vonnegut. Now, believe it or not, I've never read Slaughterhouse-Five, but I have read Cat's Cradle. So I have been in the Kurt Vonnegut world before.
Gotcha. Well, let's start with Terry Brooks. So Terry Brooks, he's been writing since 1977. He was formerly a kind of a trial lawyer who decided to go the route of being an author. He started the Shannara series with a book called The Sword of Shannara, which I think was originally supposed to be kind of a standalone novel, and now, like modern day, they've kind of lumped it into this trilogy kind of thing. He's still writing. I think he's put out a book recently, The Scar, I think in 2017 or 2018. And kind of like what you mentioned earlier, it was turned into a TV series in 2016. MTV ordered the first season. Didn't do very well. They went ahead and ordered a second season. I think they filmed it, or they got pretty close to being wrapped up with that second season. And Spike TV picked it up. That ran and just ended very recently, and now it's been kind of canceled. It's out there in limbo, and I think it's getting shopped around. So, Jeremy, did you read any of the Shannara books or watch the TV series?
No, I'd heard of the TV series, and since you assigned it for homework, I went and I watched the first episode, and it was interesting. I do appreciate that I knew one of the actors, or I knew a couple of the actors, but Manu Bennett, who's been on Arrow, was like, oh, hey, that's a nice tie-in with me and SP on the show. But it was okay.
Right.
I'm not as big into the fantasy, and this seems like it's more sci-fi fantasy than like just sci-fi like space stuff. So
Yeah. No,
I don't know if I'm going
I'd
to finish the series, but you know, it wasn't a bad series. It just wasn't for me.
No, I really tried to watch a couple of these episodes, and I maybe watched 2 or 3 from the first season. I didn't get into them very much, and then I just went and watched some clips of some of the second season just to kind of get a feel for, okay, did things get better, worse? Did they, and I don't know, I could really assess whether or not they got better or worse. It was just kind of the same. So it's probably, and I don't want to offend anybody either. I know there's some fans out there. There's a huge petition thing going on right now, initiative to get this thing back on the air somewhere. So definitely have a lot of fans and followers. And the books themselves are, this guy's got 23 New York Times bestsellers. He sold over 21 million copies, right? This is not a fly-by-night kind of project that he's got. He's got some credit here. Although he has been kind of taken some, he's been criticized for, being too close to Tolkien and not really being original with the stories. There's a great TED Talk that's out there if anybody's interested, where he's kind of talking about why he writes the way he writes. And to boil it down, basically says that he just takes everyday life events in real world and just kind of figures out a way to convert them over into the fantasy world that he's created with the Shannara series. So maybe that's where some of that maybe lack of originality is, but you got to give him credit. He's definitely an accomplished author. The Jack Vance. So yeah, and I'm with you, SP, because honestly, this is a gentleman, and I actually went so far as to watch some of the interviews with him. Super nice guy. He's a great guy. A lot of great interviews, very humble guy. And he's written a lot of great things. This guy has won just about every award that you can win. He's won Nebulas. He's won the Hugos, Edgars, you name it. He's won just about everything you can for writing novels. And I think the one book that The Last Castle was the one that I asked you guys to kind of. Did you guys look at this thing, or did either of you take the plunge and try to read it?
I didn't have time, but it would have been the one that I would started with.
Yeah. I didn't either. I watched some YouTube reviews of it, so I guess kind of like the Cliff Notes, and I couldn't even finish those.
Yeah, it's a tough read. It revolves around this planet of, I guess, human-like people, and there's a group of them that are like these aristocrats, or the high and mighty living in their castles, and they've got all this slave labor on this particular planet, and it's not Earth, it's a different planet. And the slave laborers decide one day they've just had enough. They're going to revolt, and they storm the castles. They start taking down most of them, and it kind of ends with these aristocrats deciding, you know what, we're going to leave this planet for them, and we'll go back and kind of make do on our own. And that's really the whole point of the novel. It did really well when it came out. It came out in, I think, in a short story form or novella form in some of the magazines that were out at the time. And he's described, the New York Times said he was one of America's literature's most distinctive and undervalued voices. And I think having read that, it was kind of apparent to me that he is kind of a sleeper hit. He's really good writing. I enjoyed the book. I'd never heard of him, honestly, much like you guys. So, and then Kurt Vonnegut, I did not, I actually have not read what was the book that you'd mentioned?
Cat's Cradle.
Cat's Cradle. Yep. I didn't read that, but I was familiar with Slaughterhouse-Five, and I really try to remember where this came into my life, but I only knew that this guy was, and I'm going to say this, and I don't mean any offensive, he was a little crazy. Like, he had a really, really hard life. And it was probably the most interesting thing that I found about him. He wrote 14 novels, 5 plays, 5 nonfictions, and then tons and tons of short stories. He dropped out of college early on. This is around 1943. Joined the military, went into World War II. He fought at the Battle of Bulge. He was captured. He was a POW, and he was forced to kind of live in the cellar as a POW. And every time the bomb raids would come by, the Allies would bomb. And as soon as the dust settled, they'd pull the POWs out of the cellar, and they would have them go pick up all the pieces, literally, of the people that were dead laying around. And later on, he would call this a terrible Easter egg hunt. So he had a really difficult life. I think during that time, his mom committed suicide. He got out of the military, obviously in 1945. He got a Purple Heart. He kind of mocked the fact that he got the award publicly. And I guess one of the other just kind of interesting facts about him, he has a museum in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is his hometown. And the coolest thing I saw on there was this letter that was written by his father to him when he was in World War II. It got lost in the mail. He ended up getting it after, the war was over. And Vonnegut never opened the letter. He chose not to open it. And it sits in the museum today. It's creepy. It's just sitting there. It's a letter unopened from his father to him. So, but the Slaughterhouse-5 book itself, and the reason I really wanted to kind of set up his personal history there, Slaughterhouse-5, it follows all of those life experiences almost to the T. Only once the war is over, he gets that character, I believe his name is Billy Pilgrim, gets abducted by aliens, and he's forced to mate with this other woman. They send him back down to Earth. He's got suddenly the ability to kind of time travel. And it's a very, very weird kind of, from that point on, a very weird novel, I guess. He's just kind of floating around in time, going back and forth in the future and the past. And it's attracted the attention. Like Guillermo del Toro has talked about doing this. There's a couple of other prolific directors and producers that have talked about maybe picking this up as a movie at some point. But let me just kind of pause there. Did either of you take a look at this or dive into this book in any way?
I haven't actually read it. I read about it in the research for this, and it is really interesting, and it's definitely something that I'm going to read. Like it's on my list. I like World War II stuff, and then I just this whole time travel and like just this whole everything I read about it just seems like it's right up my alley.
Yeah. SP, how about you? Same thing?
Yeah, I have not ever read Slaughterhouse-5. I heard a few things about it, and I'm like, I don't know if it's for me or not, because I'm very particular about what I ingest in terms of novels, and I might at some point in time do it, but it seems like it's a little bit off. And after reading Cat's Cradle, I mean, it's obvious that Vonnegut is a deeply disturbed individual that translates that to his novels. And it's not unreadable, but it's definitely disturbing at points when you read his stuff.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree, and especially given some of the other works, and even afterwards, like there's interviews that are out there. There's both a audio tape of these interviews, and there's some transcripts that you can see. He's very. I think at one point he was trying to sue one of the tobacco companies because he was mad that the cigarettes didn't kill him earlier than they were supposed to. So that kind of speaks to his character a little bit.
He often wrote about themes of free will and man's relation to technology. So you'd think, especially with me, that it'd just be a no-brainer. But I think the way he approached the subject matter is a little bit suspect, but that's coming from a guy that hasn't read much of his stuff. I've only read the one book. So
yeah, that's probably fair too. So we'll move on to music at this point, because this is already kind of getting me down here. But the two, what did we have here? We had the Police and we had Bon Jovi. So let's talk about the Police. Either of you guys really big Police fans?
You couldn't grow up in the 80s without hearing the Police just about every hour on the radio. It was an iconic band. I mean, everybody heard of the Police. Roxanne, Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, Message in a Bottle, Don't Stand So Close to Me. Those are iconic songs, and a lot of them were brought into the Americans FX series, which was a couple of Russian spies that were in America.
That's a great series.
And so the Police was one of the many songs, groups that were featured there. And every time I heard it, it was going back to driving my car back and forth to school, listening to all this stuff. So it was, like I said, it was impossible to live in the 80s without hearing these songs.
Absolutely. And, they started in 1977. They went through, I think, to about 1986. When they broke up, it was kind of a big deal. It was headlines everywhere. MTV News was breaking in, talking about it, keeping up to date on what was going on there. They did get back together briefly from 2007 to 2008, I think. And I don't remember how much they did at that point, but just to kind of go over the band members, there's Sting, who everyone knows, I think, or at least he's probably the most, recognizable one of them. He was on vocals and did bass. We've got Andy Summers on guitar. And then Stuart Copeland was the drummer. And I'm speaking really at this point, this is from the Synchronicity, circa 80, 82, 83, somewhere around that time frame. So they at one point were labeled the biggest band in the world. And I definitely remember a time when it felt like they really were the biggest band. Like there was, the cassette tapes were out, the music videos were being played constantly. Every Breath You Take was amazing, Wrapped Around Your Finger, King of Pain, Synchronicity 2. All those 4 tracks came off that particular album, and all of them were just amazing, at least in my opinion. I thought they were all great songs. There's still songs that I listen to even to this day. So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you, one, were you a Police fan? And two, what was your favorite song from them?
I was a fan. I mean, they weren't my favorite band, but I enjoyed a number of their songs. I'm probably more just a Sting fan than Police fan.
Yeah.
So I got into some of his stuff later. But I would probably have to say Every Breath You Take. I mean, because that's just the song that you heard more than anything. And
yeah, definitely playing at that time. It was on the airwaves constantly. Yeah. How about you, SP? What was your favorite song from them?
Yeah, just the way it felt and the melody and stuff. Because I like the songs for the melody more than anything else. The lyrics are there, of course, but Every Breath You Take was the one that I could identify with mostly out of their stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't have an incredible amount of their material. And to caveat that, I didn't have an incredible amount of tapes or CDs anyway. But I did have this album on tape and I did play it. As a matter of fact, I might have actually had it on 8-track because, because my Caprice Classic had an 8-track tape player in it.
Yep. Didn't upgrade that, huh?
Eventually we had to because it stopped working, but
yeah, well, and then they stopped manufacturing 8-tracks, so kind of limited there. I'm going to have to go the same way. I think it's all three of us are in unison here, Every Breath You Take. And I distinctly remember asking for this song to be played by the DJ over at Skateland West for a girl who I had the biggest crush on at the time. And looking back,
does your wife know about her?
No, but she doesn't listen to the show, so it's okay, right? But looking back, it was kind of like the ultimate creeper song, really, in retrospect, right? You look at the lyrics now, and I think I probably could have made a better choice. I should have gone with my first choice, which was Hello by Lionel Richie. That's a song that I really wanted to speak to her with, and I ended up picking this song. But the lyrics are kind of creepy. Am I the only one who thinks that now, or am I being too sensitive there?
Especially this day and age with like everything that's going on. Yeah, exactly. If you pay attention to the lyrics, you're like, might not be the best.
A lot of the lyrics in the songs of the 80s are just...
And movies.
You got a head scratch over that whole thing, so...
Yeah. Now, I had I didn't look for this. I didn't actively seek this out. But there is a 2010 tie-in with the Police. So in 1986, Andy Summers wrote the theme song for the movie 2010. And better yet, there's an actual music video on YouTube. Did you guys see this music video? Have you ever seen it before? I have seen it,
yeah.
I have not.
It's this, and I'm laughing at it because I don't know that I really like it. I like the movie, but it's like this funky disco, like bass-driven piano piece. It's got like synthesizers, and then it's laid right on top of Sprach Zarathustra or whatever however you pronounce that, right? The song, the main theme song, I guess, a year in 2010. And there's no lyrics in the video. It's just kind of like a lot of this footage from 2010. It looks like they've added in some footage for the video, that wasn't really, not all that great to begin with. But I was having a great time watching this. Maybe I'll put the link in the show notes so that you guys can check this out. But I was very surprised. And I don't even know, to be honest, it's been pretty recent that I even found that there was a music video. I did not know this even existed until very recently. Were you on top of this one, SP?
I don't know if I'm on top of anything musically related in terms of pop culture, but I did see it because it had 2010 involved with it. And I had to scratch my head. I think what they were going for was the iconic scenes in 2001, where both at the end and at the beginning, where you had these very epic music overtures, and I think they were just trying to modernize that with 2010, and I think #fail might have started with that.
You can't really top I can't pronounce it, but the Zarathustra.
Sprach Zarathustra, yeah.
You can't really top it.
Yeah, you can't. And I don't know. They try to Frankenstein this whole thing together, and it didn't really pay off. So I kind of felt bad too when I was kind of, watching that video, just because Andy Summers does not look happy at all. the entire time they show him, he looks absolutely pissed off that he's doing this. So I don't know if that's true or not, but he definitely didn't look happy. So the other band, Bon Jovi, so they started in 1983. They are still rocking out. That's the band members are John Bon Jovi on vocals. And then I'm kind of going off of the Slippery When Wet era because there's a couple of people that kind of came and went over the years, of course, with most bands. But so John Bon Jovi, except Rush. John Bon Jovi on vocals, David Bryan on keyboards, Tico Torres on drums, Alex Such on bass, and Richie Sambora as the lead guitar. And I threw this question out to you. Hair bands. Were you guys into hair bands, SP? Was this something you were doing? Did you have, and here's the follow-up question. Did you have a perm and how long did your hair grow?
Well, I was a hockey player, so of course I had the flow going for a little bit.
You probably had the perm and the mullet, like the perm mullet.
Party in the back, business in the front. Yeah, exactly. So the whole thing about hair bands, I don't know if I was a fan of hair bands. I know I was a fan, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, of glamour rock.
Oh boy! Hey, don't worry, I've got a story there too. So you're in good company.
But I don't think my definition of glamour rock is what is the definition of glamour rock today. So there's that. But yeah, everybody was a fan of Bon Jovi. I was a fan of Bon Jovi. And I'm still a fan of Bon Jovi today because I watched Deadliest Catch, and Deadliest Catch starts with Wanted Dead or Alive. That's from Bon Jovi. So, yeah.
That's right. How about you, Jeremy?
I am a big Bon Jovi fan, and they're probably the band that I've seen live more than anything. I mean, I've seen them probably 3 or 4 times in concert.
Wow. And so I'm going to ask you, because I've never been to a Bon Jovi concert. Are they as crazy and loud as you see in the music videos? And are there really that many hot-looking women in the stands?
I'm not really sure about the hot-looking women because...
Were you there with your wife?
I was there with my wife, who's also a big Bon Jovi fan.
Yeah,
she's not listening. She doesn't care about podcasts.
Right.
But it's just... I'm thinking the age range of the Bon Jovi fan is pretty significant. So I'm sure there are hot-looking women in there. But it was also kind of dark. But the concert itself, they put on a really great show. I mean, they had the whole like stages that were like lifting up, and they know how to put on a show,
play to the audience, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I mean, the hardest part about it is they're so well known, everyone's singing along. So at times, it's hard to hear the actual, people singing because of the audience singing.
Right. And they've not been drinking, and they're all in key, right? I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I definitely was into hair bands, although I don't know that I really knew what hair bands were at the time. I was just kind of like, oh, this is what rock is, and I'm kind of going with it. And I was completely convinced that Poison's like 1986 album cover, "Look What the Cat Dragged In," had some of the hottest looking females of 1986. And it turns out it would be much later that I realized that, holy crap, that's a bunch of dudes that were on the cover. So, there you go, SP. I was, just kind of into that and really had no idea either. So, all right. So I asked you guys your favorite songs, and SP, I'm going to start with you. What's your favorite Bon Jovi song?
Blaze of Glory. We'll just go with that one.
Blaze of Glory, really?
Yeah.
Why?
It's probably because it wasn't that associated with Youngbloods, I'm thinking.
Young Guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. They did wasn't that on the soundtrack, and didn't they have a music video?
Yeah.
With them as well? I'm pretty sure. All right. Jeremy, how about you? Favorite song? This had to be tough for you since you're a big fan of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, so many bands that are like from that era that are still going, they aren't putting out new songs, but Bon Jovi is. Like, they're still putting out new albums. And like they've changed. Like, they had a country styled album a few years ago. That was good. Yeah. But really, when I want to listen to Bon Jovi, I probably go to that like Slippery When Wet era, and just like Wanted Dead or Alive, or Blaze of Glory is also great. Just anything from that Slippery When Wet album, is something that I would go to listen to.
My choice is going to be Raise Your Hands from the Slippery When Wet album. Just because this was featured in 1987's Spaceballs. And then I would say that whole scene is awesome with Barf. He's coming down, he's doing his little dance. He's got I think he's eating ice cream or something out of the gallon there, or the jug or whatever. I think Living on a Prayer and Runaway are both close seconds for me. And you forgot to mention the Spaceball soundtrack actually did not even have that song in there. It's in there, and it's probably it's probably my favorite song from that soundtrack. It actually did not make the soundtrack, so unfortunately. Let's talk about that album though, real quick. Slippery When Wet. This was their biggest album. I could be wrong there, but I'm still bummed because I remember the U.S. cover itself was a garbage bag that had Slippery When Wet that was kind of traced in the water. And in Japan, they got let's just call it a wet t-shirt version. And I remember as a kid, I was 13 years old. I was walking in the mall or something, and they had the Japanese import album, like the vinyl, sitting there in the window and like showcased at the record store. And if I could quote Christmas Story, that was the soft glow of electric sex gleaming in the window for me as a 13-year-old kid. I always felt like we should have had that cover. Instead, we got the trash bag. So whatever. If you guys had to pick an album, I'm guessing that this was probably your favorite one as well, the Slippery When Wet album.
Yeah, Slippery When Wet was one of the first CDs I bought. And I think I still have it today. Of course, I don't play CDs anymore, but it is probably my favorite Bon Jovi album. And for a secondary song, I would have to go with, and I like all of the stuff, but Who Says You Can't Go Home? I'm partial to that one too, which is not on Slippery When Wet.
Yeah, that was on their, like, I can't remember the name of the album, but it was their more country-ish album. And yeah, I really like that too.
Yeah. I had also asked you guys about the videos and if you had a favorite video. Jeremy, do you have a favorite MTV music video?
I don't. I was much younger than you guys, or I am much younger than you guys. So
take a hint. Yeah, we can take a hint.
So I wasn't allowed to watch MTV during most of the 80s.
Right.
So it was just more listening to the radio and stealing tapes from my sister.
SP, do you have a favorite video? Are you thinking or are you grumbling?
I'm thinking. I'll go back to Blaze of Glory just because of the movie tie-in. I'm not a big fan of that movie either, but I just liked how it played with the music.
So I don't. I'm trying to think. Raise Your Hands never had a music video unless you count Spaceballs. But in lieu of that, I guess I'll go with Living on a Prayer because that video was absolutely huge. It was one of these MTV exclusives. They would tease it before the commercial break, saying coming back or after the break, we're going to show or we're going to play the latest Bon Jovi video. It was all over the charts. It seemed like it was on the charts forever. In fact, I'm pretty sure it just came off the charts just a couple years ago. And it tells you the story too, because like you watch the video and you get to see the struggles of John Bon Jovi and his stunt crew trying to get the timing down with the wires and the harness, and he can't get it. And it's all in black and white. And then it cuts about midway through the video and then suddenly it's in color. And now, now you get the sense, oh, now they're live. They're no longer practicing, right? And then you're waiting for the big moment. And sure enough, there comes the big moment where he finally, they pull him up in the harness and he's got it right. And, he's flying over the crowd and all his crotch gloriness kind of thing. So it was a cool video. And
wow. Hairband fan and going for the crotch shots. Okay.
Flying crotches. Yep. That's what we were. Right. That's what we're doing then. It was the 80s. What can you say? Yeah. We were a younger time for all of us. All right. Any other final thoughts on either Bon Jovi or The Police from USP? In
all of the TV shows that I've been watching lately that go back to the 80s, Ready Player One is one of them, Stranger Things. This is the iconic moment of the 80s, is the songs, the music from it, and Police and Bon Jovi are definitely a part of it. So it is 80s culture.
Definitely. Would you agree there, Jeremy? Or do you got anybody else that stands out? Yeah.
No, I mean, I think Bon Jovi in particular is like, they had so many number one hits in the 80s, so many off of this one album.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, if you want a snapshot of the 80s, go for that.
Yeah. If you have not had a chance to listen to Bon Jovi, one, you shouldn't be listening to this podcast. But if you are, we thank you. Please go listen to Bon Jovi. You'll appreciate him.
And listen to Bon Jovi at a lower volume while they're listening to this.
Right. Put it in the background. Let's talk about movies. And really for this one, we only had one movie, but we've got some directors that we'll talk about. So we'll get into some movies there. But the movie that we had to talk about tonight was Real Genius from 1985. So this movie was directed by Martha Coolidge. It was produced by Brian Gazer. It starred Val Kilmer, Gabe Jarrett, Michelle, I think it's Bierink is her name, and William Archon. The synopsis, and I'm going to I didn't write this. I'm just reading off this little synopsis that I have. When science whiz Mitch Taylor arrives at Pacific Tech as a freshman, he's paired up with genius senior Chris Knight to work on a laser project. Mitch initially doesn't care for Knight's slacker attitude, but is eventually won over, and their friendship allows them to make new progress on the laser project. It's only when the boys learn that the government intends to use a laser as a weapon that they start to question what they're actually working for. So, SP, I'm going to start with you. Overall, first impressions of this movie, was it good or bad when you watched it recently? And did you watch it as a kid growing up? Or was there a big delta there?
Oh, yeah, I watched it definitely when I was a kid, and I did watch it recently, too. I mean, Real Genius, Weird Science, you had to watch those if you were interested in rocket scientist stuff like I was. And I hadn't watched it in years, and this is always one that's in the back of my mind. Well, maybe I'll catch it on FX on a Saturday afternoon in the background or something like that. But I actually sat down and watched this for the first time a couple weeks ago, and it definitely had a lot of glaring plot holes in terms of like knowing it as an adult versus as a kid. But there's a couple of things that I just had to marvel on. This is a year before Top Gun for Val Kilmer. 1 year. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, the guy that was ultimately going to be a Batman. This is 1 year before Top Gun and the iconic volleyball scene. And you take a look at his body in the volleyball scene, and you take a look at his chest in this, because you do see it in this movie. He was working out a lot in that intervening year.
Yeah, he hit the weights before then.
Yeah.
I think this was the quintessential wake-up call actually for me, going, you know what? If you get into this stuff and all the dollars are really from the defense industrial complex, you're probably going to be doing some work for the DoD at some point in time. So you're going to have to make peace with that if this is the career that you want in the future. And that's a lot of what happens. I mean, even the innocuous stuff, even if you're looking at some early development stuff that you think has the great civilian, just normal consumer sort of use, it's going to be adapted for military use at some point. So yeah, you got to think of that. But this is just funny with William Atherton. He played the same sort of character that he played in Ghostbusters, and
I'm pretty sure his character just after this went to New York and became that person over in the Ghostbusters movie. That would be my guess.
Yeah, exactly. And
because he's identical. Yeah, there's no difference in the characters.
Same guy, except for he was like an inspector in New York, and here he's a hotshot professor. I love what happens to his house too, because he's skimming off the top. As an adult, you figure out what's going on. As a kid, you're just like, oh, I don't really understand everything that's going on in this movie. But as an adult, you figure out what's going on. There's some fraud involved, and he's living off of the achievements of his students, which happens even today. It still happens. Like, students are the ones that come up with the really great ideas, and they can go implement it. And their research sponsors, their professors, are the ones who kind of get the credit for it.
Yeah, and they use that excuse to get on base. Remember that scene where they're sitting there at the booth or the gate, and he's like, "Hey, we're kind of young. We're the scientists," and that kind of thing. They actually use what you just said as a reason to get in, which is a huge plot hole. I can't believe they just let them in into the base like that. I think
the biggest thing that I took from this, and I was kind of worried because I was in college at the time, I was worried about going nuts. and the what's his name? The guy that ends up in the cellar there.
Lazo?
So I was worried about becoming him, and just going nuts and ending up in some sewer somewhere trying to print out a bunch of contest entries so I could win the contest and 30% of the prizes or whatever. So that underlying plot is, to this day, is just hilarious. But yeah.
Well, I didn't realize the guy that played Lazio was Uncle Rico in Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, he's obviously a much younger person then, right? But yeah. So let me ask you, Jeremy, is this a movie that you had seen originally, or was this just part of your homework assignments, and now you've seen it?
I'd always wanted to see it. I just never really got around to it until it was homework. And so
did you like the movie?
I loved it. I mean,
oh, really good.
It's one of those just 80s movies that, leave your brain at the door because, like SP said, there's tons of plot holes, but it was fun. I really liked it.
Did you like the skating rink inside the dorm? That lasted all of 15 minutes or whatever.
You're right.
Never ended.
It just, don't think too hard about like how that came to be or how the cleanup happened and stuff.
Right. And there's a moment with that whole thing with the ice skating rink, right? And then I couldn't help but think, you mentioned Top Gun, but wasn't he Iceman?
Yes, he was.
Top Gun? Oh, he was, yeah.
So I don't know if that was, if that was intentional or not. But
yeah, I bet it was, because they also had the whole, carving the liquid nitrogen cooled ice to make a quarter.
Yeah. Yep, that was him. So there you go. Iceman went on to join the military short after this movie, and we got to see him in Top Gun.
And then became Batman.
And then became Batman. Then later became the Saint. Was it the Saint? Yep. All right. Enough of that. So here, I guess my initial thoughts. As a kid, I loved this movie. Ian, it would be many years before I would see it again, and I can't say it held up really well for me. Honestly, there's a lot of plot holes, and like you said, you got to check your brain at the door. There's a huge level of suspension of disbelief for a lot of these things. And some of the comedy was kind of hit or miss. Like there's moments where I was like laughing out loud. And then there was other moments that I was just kind of like, okay, that really wasn't funny. And I don't know where it got disconnected there, but
the whole swimming pool scene didn't really.
You didn't do that in college?
I didn't see the point of that particular scene. I mean, it just.
Oh, it was Chicks, all man. A plot device to have, Mitch, to have Mitch be lonely and need companionship.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but when I was watching it, I'm like, this is your 80s movie, so let's get some, girls in swimsuits on the screen.
Beauticians. Come on, call them correctly. Beauticians.
They were beauticians. That's right. Yeah. They make that very clear. So I remember, here are a couple of things too. Like there's a ton of computers in this. So anybody wants to geek out on the old 80s computers. There's an Apple IIc that Laszlo uses at one point. There's some HP's 150s that are in there. The Symbolics 3600 is the computer that Laszlo's using at the very end, where he kind of hacks into the military in those kind of final scenes. So there's some cool 80s computers. But let's really talk about the 25-minute mark of the movie, because this is where it really becomes super important, because this is in the dorm and we get a shot of the kitchen. And in the kitchen, there are boxes of cereal that are on the shelf. And we've got Cookie Crisp, Donkey Kong, Cracker Jack, and then there's a lame box of Chex in there as well. But did you guys catch that? Yeah. Did you catch the cereal references?
The Donkey Kong one made me stop and actually look at it.
And pause, look at it.
Yeah, because I was surprised to see, normally you don't see brand names in movies.
What I caught with the cereal is when Val Kilmer is, as Chris Knight, is really lounging about in the dorm, like he is being drummed out of school. And he goes to get cereal in his bunny slippers and his robe and everything. Yep. And yeah, that is when you see the cereal, or at least I cued in on all the cereal. And I was like, okay, I see. Yeah. Of course, seeing cereal, I guess it's era dependent, because seeing cereal to me, I go through the aisle in the grocery store all the time. It's a whole aisle full of cereal. So that's not a big deal seeing cereal, but seeing cereal in the era, that is what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you, the reason I got excited is we have, and I've plugged this before, we've got a Discord server up now, and it's pretty light. We haven't really plugged it too much, but one of the channels that we have in there is a cereal channel where we just talk about cereals, and the guys or girls are always posting pictures of all these different cereals from the 80s and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a hot topic, and I get really excited when we talk about cereals from the 80s.
Is it Hot Topic cereal from like the store Hot Topic, or it just is a Hot Topic?
I don't think that'd be very good.
No, that would not be good. Tastes like real goth. Here. So speaking of which, the fashion in this movie is amazing. Like it screams the 80s. I don't know who did the outfits. A lot of that stuff I never wore as a kid, and it certainly may have looked great on models and stuff. But if you get a chance, go back and look at some of the outfits. They're outlandish and outrageously screaming 80s through and through. In fact, I think there's one gentleman. He's actually got a gray members only jacket on.
Yeah.
So that even got an appearance at one point. But let's talk about Project Crossbow. And this is if you haven't seen the movie, the whole the whole project, or I guess what they're trying to do, and I mentioned it earlier, they're trying to build this laser that, what's it, what's the wattage?
It's
or,
an
I don't know what they call
incredible
that.
amount of power that you're not going to be able to generate in an aircraft or spacecraft.
Right. So they're trying to do this. And they do, of course, because it's a movie, right? They figure out how to do this. And the whole idea is they're going to mount this on a spacecraft, or, suborbit, orbital. I don't know where it is. Somewhere they're going to put this on a spacecraft, and they're going to go around just laser bolting people from the sky and assassinating tyrants and that kind of thing. Well, that's at least what we think they're going to do. But how viable is this? Or are we better off just with sharks with freaking laser beams?
Yeah,
that's for you, SB.
Right.
You're the science guy here.
We're just not even today, we're not at the point where we could do this. Because if you are in a spacecraft, you are at least 62 miles up, because that's the definition of space, 62 miles up. And low Earth orbit is 200 miles up. That's a long way for a beam not to diffract enough. So in this movie, the little trailer that they play inside the war room is a butler serving this guy drinks or breakfast or something like that. And they laze the guy in the chair.
It's so obnoxious, dude.
And he disappears, but nothing around him is affected. The guy is not affected next to him, whatever. We don't have that sort of precision today, even with our optics, and definitely don't have enough power to do that. And if we did, it would do exactly what the laser did at the end of the movie, and it would go through everything. So you would know that there was a laser bolt.
Right.
I mean, it would dig a hole in the ground with that much power.
Yeah. Well, so you're saying I don't need to be afraid of this anymore.
I'd be very afraid.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the laser, because the end of the movie, these guys all, to get back at the professor, they go set up this prism in this little stained glass window, and then they fill his house full of popcorn. And once the laser is ignited and they shoot the laser, they hit the vat of unpopped popcorn, and it begins to pop. And it pops so much that it ends up taking down the entire house. So is that feasible? Is that possible even or would they just go right through those kernels?
Yeah. So let's talk. If you could get the laser to actually function the way it's supposed to in this movie, it would hit that bucket of popcorn and it would just go right through it. And I don't think you would get a lot of pop. Maybe around the laser itself, you would get some popping, but it's not going to superheat the whole pan up. I mean, it was a room-sized pan. It's just not going to work. And I know they put the prism in there to diffract it, but you're going to burn a lot of pop. There was no burnt popcorn.
It was all perfectly
I can't
popped.
even do that with my microwave.
Right. There's no way. I mean, it's coming out and it's fluffy yellow, golden, coming out the windows and seeping through, the walls and the creases in the house and that sort of thing. But you're right. None of it burns.
If you could get popcorn to pop uniformly and perfectly, you could destroy a dwelling, because the force of the kernel exploding would, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of them, it would put a force against the walls. And I don't know if it would do what it did to the house, or if it would just push the walls out. Like it would push the windows out and the doors, and it would, like water, it would start going out.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good segue into the next piece here, which is, I had asked you guys there's an episode of Mythbusters where they tried to bust this or not. It's called Car versus Rain. Jeremy, did you get a chance to watch that episode?
I did.
Did you find it anywhere?
Yeah, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was on the Discovery Channel app or Hulu or something, but I did find it streaming.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, is this possible? Were they able to blow up a house with this?
No. They were able to pop popcorn with a laser, though.
There you go.
But not a big, huge vat the size of a great room.
No, they got I think a couple kernels to pop. And then they were like, well, let's just make this big thing of popcorn and see if we can simulate the pressure to blow out a window. And that, I believe that did not happen.
Yeah, I think I remember watching that. And I honestly threw that out there as kind of a bonus thing if you guys could find it. And I did not. I think I remember seeing the original, and I want to say I remember the popcorn seeping out. They were able to get it to pop up that way, but I don't ever remember the little house. And it was kind of like a small shed, right? Like a little shack or something. It wasn't like
I don't think they ever actually made the actual house. They did try to pop popcorn with explosions because it's Mythbusters. And
right, they got to blow something up.
Yeah, and that wasn't very successful either. It was because of the sustained heat that's required to actually pop the kernel.
That's right. It burned a lot of the popcorn.
Right. It just the explosion blast didn't have the heat for long enough to actually pop the kernels.
Got it. Well, there you go. It's kind of depressing. I was really hoping that worked. But I guess the only other thing that I'd kind of mention is, as far as this movie goes, is the music. There were some good pieces in there. I love the montages. I think there was maybe 3 or 4 of them throughout. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of, canon for 80s movies in general. But we had Don Henley's All She Wants to Do Is Dance in there. One Night Love Affair by Bryan Adams. And then, of course, we had Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. So it had some pretty good songs in it. I don't remember if this soundtrack was actually ever released, though. It may have been. I never caught it, but it did have some pretty good hits on there. Any final thoughts on this movie before we move on? Either one of you guys?
It's a must-see for kid science movies in the 80s. If you're into that sort of thing, you got to see this. And you're right, William Atherton is the same character in Ghostbusters as he is.
Well, after he was discredited and stuff.
Oh, I see. He had to go work for the government. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he basically had to just be like a inspector in New York.
Yeah. So Real Genius, Weird Science, and Revenge of the Nerds is another one around the same time. And let's just throw Zapped in there as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
It's your show. You can do whatever you want.
That's a terrible movie. We have to figure out a way to get Zapped on here somehow.
If you have a Charles in Charge episode.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do a Scott Baio kind of special. So let's talk about 2 directors. You may have heard of them. One is James Cameron. The other is Steven Spielberg. And we'll start with Cameron. He was born in 1954. He's still making movies. I think we all, pretty much everybody I think knows him. Is he still making movies?
Yeah, because
he's got the avatars. He's got like 5 more movies coming out. So let's I threw the question out there because we're not going to get into their cat. I mean, both of these guys have a number of movies, and so we would spend the next 5 hours just talking about them 2 alone. But I threw the question out there about what was your favorite movie and why from James Cameron. So SP, what do you got on your top of the list here?
Okay, I did my top 5, right? Because I can't just pick one because he's really good in terms of impacting me as a person and as a geek and whatever. So we'll start with number 5. I'll go with Titanic. And I've seen it once in the movie theater and once on VHS. Yes, I do have the 2-copy VHS version of Titanic. Right. And it was iconic to me because it was the first time that I saw what would really happen with the Titanic. I mean, it was still a lot of conjecture at the time, but finding the Titanic back in those days was like finding the Malaysia Air Flight MH370 right now. We haven't found it yet. And that's kind of where this movie was with Titanic. It was shortly after it was found. So there's a we could go into Titanic left, right, and backwards, but I'm not going to. It's just number 5 on my list. So number 4, True Lies. I mean, what an amazing, it was the original Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It was great. If you haven't seen it, it's got Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis. It's awesome. And number 3, I'll go with The Abyss. And I believe that is a severely underrated sci-fi movie because you have underwater sea monsters. You got an underwater oil rig. You got underwater submarines, vehicles, and you have just a tremendous survival story. And you have some really nutso, what are they, SEALs, I guess, that go down to try to help them too. So it's an amazing combination of a lot of stuff, of wonder, military. I mean, you got some alien stuff in there. You got some
aliens, man. Yeah, that's the best part to me at the very end, of course.
Right.
But.
And then number 2, I'll go with Avatar just because it is a visual spectacle. And yes, I have seen it again recently. We were talking about it on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. for like half a year. And I'm like, okay, I got to actually see this thing again. And I saw it and okay, my curiosity is satiated probably for another 10, 15 years. But yeah, Yeah, Avatar. It's a great movie to see, and
I've still never watched it.
Well, I think you're missing out because
you are missing out.
I've been to the Disney park.
Yeah.
What? You've been to the park, but you haven't seen the movie?
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, not much left for you at that point.
And then number one, of course, is Aliens. Aliens, I will take Aliens above Alien. I will take Aliens above the Terminator. T2 might have been different, but yeah, I will go number 5, Titanic, number 4, True Lies, number 3, The Abyss, number 2, Avatar, number 1, Aliens would be my top 5.
Very nice. That's a great list. I think T2 is missing, but that's just my personal opinion. What about you, Jeremy? You got... you can give me a top 5, or if you want to just stick with your top 1,
don't have a top 5. I would probably just say Terminator 2 and Terminator in that order.
Yeah. Why were those movies so big for you?
It was just, I didn't see the actual first Terminator movie until much later.
Mm-hmm. Same here.
I started with T2, and it was just Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie, summer blockbuster. And it was just, I don't know what it was that kind of captured me about it, but it was just fun and
loud,
action packed, and seeing Schwarzenegger kind of get beat up, and then you're like the half robot face and stuff. And
I think the series means more if you start with the Terminator 2 and then go back and watch Terminator. Because you get what the essence of what the series is with Terminator 2, and then you go back and see the love story of Terminator without getting pissed off that it's a love story.
I can see that, yeah. And you have the iconic thing at the end, which the Ready Player One movie copied with Schwarzenegger going into the lava and then doing the thumbs up.
Yep. Yeah, a little straight tribute thing that they did.
Yeah, they did that with the Iron Giant at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think so Terminator 2, I think, is probably at the top of my list. And I actually saw the first one and then saw the second one. I kind of had, I guess, maybe a little different experience, because for me, it was really cool to see the evil character that I knew from the first one that scared the crap out of me now was the good guy, right? That whole role reversal was kind of a neat twist to it. But I can definitely see what you're saying, where if you watch 2 and then go back 1, I get that. That would be kind of cool as well. But Terminator 2 was just awesome, because honestly, we got to watch Eddie Furlong literally go through puberty right before our eyes. We got to hear him and see him go through puberty. There was a number of things that were they had to go back and redub with his voice, because there's only, I think, one scene that was still the original audio when it was recorded, because he literally did go through puberty and his voice was changing. He was cracking all the time and it didn't sound the same way. So kudos to him for growing up in this. But it's action packed. I mean, it's got some sick tunes in there from Guns N' Roses. You Could Be Mine. That video was huge again on MTV when it came out. I thought the special effects were awesome, right? It was a combination of the practical effects, which were really good. But then this is the first movie that I remember, and you could make a case for The Abyss, especially when the water serpent thing
same
comes
technology.
up. Yeah, that was the same technology, and it was kind of just an extension of that. But obviously crazier in terms of the way it looked with T2. But it was the first time that I recall saying, "Wow, I'm really starting to the lines between reality and special effects are starting to blur for me." As a viewer. Yeah. I thought that
The Abyss was in 1989 and Terminator 2 was in 1991. So you did have 2 years to develop the technology that went into that effect.
Yeah, they just kind of honed those skills and took it to the next level. The nuclear nightmare scene was so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, that whole thing was just really cool. As and at this point, I think, and I'm already coming up on 18, 19 years old here, so I was really into this. And it was huge. I mean, they did I don't know how much money. I didn't make that note, but it did a ton of money when it came out. I know the budget originally was $12 million, and I think when it was all said and done, they were at $102 million. So I guess they're a little bit over budget there. And then the one scene, I think we've talked about this on the show already here. I forget which episode it was or who was on, but the whole Max and Wolfie scene, right? The way the Eddie Furlong's character, what's his name? Can't think of his name right now, but his foster father. So when he calls home and his foster mom answers the phone,
Connor?
And it turns out to be the John Connor. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was like, is he really not remembering John Connor, the character of Terminator? Okay.
No, I don't know who he is. But that scene where the T2 shuts up his foster father by kind of extending his hand and a blade that goes right through the milk carton and right through his mouth and into the wall. And then he just kind of violently and abruptly just retracts that blade and his body slumps to the floor. That scene was just, it still is awesome. As gruesome as it is, I still think it's one of the cooler scenes in like a science fiction, fantasy kind of movies. So, but yeah, Terminator 2 is up there. And I would say that, Aliens is definitely probably a solid second. Titanic is up there for me as well. Titanic, I saw that movie and you're going to hate me, or well, I don't know if you'll hate me for this. I saw that movie, I'm not kidding you, 11 times in the movie theater. The only other movies that I've seen that many are Twister. I saw that 10 times in the theater. And then I think all the prequel movies are tied at about 9 times a piece for me. So Titanic is actually the movie that I've ever seen the most in the theater. And to your point, it was just awesome to watch that whole thing and the way it played out. Everything about it, I just was kind of fascinated by it. So it didn't make my top. It wasn't my number one, but it's definitely in my top 3.
I've always been fascinated by the Titanic, all the history behind it. But I went to the movie under duress because my girlfriend at the time wanted to go see it.
Oh, right. She forced you to see it.
Yes. And
you had no choice.
I have not seen it since.
I saw it with my ex-wife, so maybe that has something to do with it too.
I'm starting to see a theme because I think I was with somebody at the time that was into it as well.
I didn't need the love story. I just wanted to see it more of like what happened, more of an action story. And then I don't know.
I guess it humanized it. Like you knew that there was some stuff like that going on in the ship, right? That not exactly Jack and Rose, but you knew something was going on the ship, and it gave a more human dimension to it because let's face it happened in 1912?
Yeah.
We're 100 years later.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm still looking for an opportunity to request somebody to draw me like they do one of their girls. I have not been able to work that into any conversations with my wife, but I would like to
Mike
get that
would do that for you
at some point. Yeah, he's kind of gross and weird though.
I know a number of comic book artists.
Okay. If you're listening to the show and you want to draw me, give me a call. All right. So I guess the question I threw out there for James Cameron, SP, what do you think he's going to be known for when it's all said and done? He's passed and we're looking back on his filmography. What do you think he's going to be best known for at this point?
That's a tough one because it depends on your point of view. If you're big into the love stories, Titanic would be one thing that you'd remember him for. If you're big into the action, it's a toss-up between Aliens, Terminator, and Avatar because he's been so iconic with all of those. I hate to say it, but I think he's going to be most known for Avatar just because I think he's going to fumble it until it never happens again.
Yeah, that movie, the sequels have been put off for quite some time.
But now Disney owns it.
Is he really?
Avatar was owned by Fox and now Disney owns
Fox. Yeah, but he's
Fox.
still involved in the production.
Right. But
they own
Disney,
the IP. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, they own the IP now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I can see them. They'll capitalize on that for sure. Yeah. That's George Lucas. All right, let's talk about Spielberg. And at some point, we are going to have a bonus stage episode where we just talk about Steven Spielberg. So we don't need to get into every detail here, but same kind of thing. And Jeremy, I'll start with you on this one. What's your favorite Steven Spielberg movie and why did you pick it?
Well, I mean, I'm looking through his stuff right now and really it's more the TV stuff with me with Steven Spielberg. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean, he does
like Amazing Stories.
No, like Animaniacs. But, no, I mean, he was
That's fair. I love the Animaniacs.
I mean,
that's a great show.
my username or nickname on going back to the BBS days has been some form of Yakko. So Animaniacs is great, but also Band of Brothers. He was executive producer on that.
Yeah,
and that was such an amazing miniseries, like he and Tom Hanks did.
The follow-up was good too, I think.
Yeah.
Pacific.
Yeah, the Pacific. I haven't finished that. I own it, but I haven't finished it.
The Band of Brothers is definitely better, in my opinion. There are some people that I've run into that said the Pacific is their favorite of the two, but Band of Brothers by far is my favorite and the favorite of a lot of people out there.
Yeah. I mean, they're both amazing.
And also you have to throw Saving Private Ryan in there because it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a lot of stuff like that. TV, like in my era coming up, like I was in high school in the 90s and stuff like Animaniacs would be like what I would throw on. It was on TV in the afternoons. Freakazoid, that was fun. On the movie side, E.T. was... I haven't really watched it in a long time, but I recently rode the ride and kind of got into that universe again. And that's something I want to revisit because I remember really enjoying it as a kid.
Yeah, that one gets played at least once a year in this house because they have to. Not because they like the movie, but Dad says they have to watch it.
But if I really had to pick one, it would be the Indiana Jones movies. Probably Last Crusade would be my favorite out of the three.
That's a solid pick, and we've actually discussed which was better, Indiana Jones versus Raiders. Yeah, we won't get into that right now. But SP, what about you? Favorite Steven Spielberg movie?
I can't even. This is like trying to make me pick the favorite of one of my kids, which, man, it's...
Well, we all have a favorite kid. I mean, that's just...
But I only have one, so it's easy.
Oh.
I remember an iconic quote, and I don't even know if he said this or not, but somebody explained this to me that he said this. If I would have had the script to Schindler's List a year earlier, I would have never have done that dinosaur movie, is what he said, or was explained to me that he said. Schindler's List is just an amazing movie. Of all the things that he did, from Used Cars to Ready Player One, Back to the Future, and we talked about the Band of Brothers. I love Sequest, Sequest 2023 or 2032 or whatever it was. And I loved Falling Skies. I mean, it was a good popcorn movie or TV series in the summer. Terra Nova, I think that's another series that was canceled way too early. I don't know.
I got into that one too. Yeah, I was really mad.
Yeah, I don't. That. And it was Fox, by the way. Let's get that clear. It's the same channel that canceled Firefly. Close Encounters of the Third Kind and the Indiana Jones. I mean, wow. What a list to choose from. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, An American Tail, Goonies,
Jaws,
Under the Dome, if you like that.
He directed an episode of Columbo.
The guy was just, he has got 57 directing credits, 171 producer credits right now on IMDb.
And you can only pick one.
Oh, man. You know, I will go back to what I was going to say earlier. Schindler's List is probably the most moving of anything he's done. It was one of the more meaningful films ever. It's like the Shawshank Redemption level, where if you had top 5 movies ever, those would be included. And I'll have to go with it. Am I going to watch it all the time? No, that's more like Back to the Future, but Schindler's List, he gets a lot of kudos for making that movie, pulling that one off.
Yeah, that one's a tearjerker several times throughout the movie. I was thinking like Amistad is another one. Lincoln. I don't have the list pulled up for me. He's my favorite director. I think he is the greatest of all time. I think I threw that out there, whether or not he was. And if you have a varying opinion, that's totally cool too. But for me, there's nobody better in terms of directors. And just his imprint and fingerprints are on just about everything out there that I knew and loved growing up. And I know he influenced a ton of other directors, J.J. Abrams, and even his peers were influenced by him at the time. Are you telling me
that Spielberg is responsible for the lens flare?
No, I think he's got some lens flare, but it was Abrams who really kind of, went a little crazy with it. We all know that. But yeah, we can talk about Star Trek some other time.
Yeah. But also the relationship between Spielberg and Lucas. I mean, their early stuff, they were coming up together, and Lucas was involved in the Indiana Jones stuff. Spielberg, I think, helped with some of the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they were always on set together on a lot of these pieces, and I think we talked about that on one of the episodes recently. It was 2 episodes back, I think, about how there's a lot of Star Wars stuff in Raiders or in the Raiders series, and in Raiders there's some Star Wars stuff, and those guys just kind of giving nods to each other for being friends and contributing to each other's works in a lot of different ways. I think Raiders for me is the number 1 movie from Steven Spielberg. It's Probably not his best work. I would agree that Schindler's List is right up there. Saving Private Ryan is right up there for me too. I'm a big World War II person. I was a big fan of Band of Brothers, The Pacific, and a number of other World War II movies that, Dad made me watch as a kid. And when that movie came out, it was one of the few movies that I went to the movie theater with my father to watch. And that's a very rare thing to get my dad out into the movie theaters. And I remember just the experience of both of us it was like us being on the couch again, right? Back in, the late 70s, watching these movies that would come on, or, movies that he wanted to watch because he was in, Vietnam, that kind of thing. So it has a different emotional impact for me, that being Saving Private Ryan. But Raiders is still my favorite, because if I had to pick, one favorite movie of all time, I always say it's Raiders and the Lost Ark. So by default, it's going to have to be Raiders and the Lost Ark.
Yeah. So of course you did E.T., right? And unfortunately with E.T., it was a movie of wonderment for the time, but you rewatch it now and I just can't listen to Drew Barrymore scream. And it's one of those movies you pull out like once a decade and you go, oh, wow, this was such a great movie. And it was at the time, but it's not meant forever.
Yeah, I think that some of my kids do like it. I made the joke earlier that I force them to watch it, but if I throw it on, it holds their attention. And there is something about that movie, much like The Goonies and much like what we get in Stranger Things, I think, where as a kid, you look at that and go, wow, that really could be me. And you kind of put yourself in the movies, and really the sense of adventure there from a kid's perspective in all three of those.
Stranger
those three examples
Things really meant for kids, though? Yeah.
No. Are kids watching it? Heck yeah, they are. I can tell you right now, all of my son's buddies are all watching this stuff, and I'm like, why are you?
They're going to be scarred
why
for
you're
life.
Not watching this? Why are you watching
wow.
it? Yeah. But yeah, they are definitely watching it. So,
and E.T. also was, introduced everyone to Reese's Pieces.
That's true.
That's right. No one cared about that candy until that movie came out.
Which are great, but they're even better when you mix them with M&Ms. You get the chocolate and the peanut butter.
Get out of here. That's witchcraft. I've never heard of such a thing. That's pretty good. I have to try that. All right. Let's move on. We'll talk about, I'm sure James Cameron and Steven Spielberg will come back up at some point in the course of this show. And we'll get into more of them, like I said. And we may have to do a James Cameron kind of bonus stage as well, because there's a lot of content there. So let's talk television, and we'll get to the last couple topics here for tonight. We'll talk about The Greatest American Hero. So this was a TV series that came out on ABC, ran from 1981 to 1983. And this starred William Catt as Ralph Hinckley, Robert Culp as Bill Maxwell, Connie Selleck as Pam Davidson, and Eddie from Eddie and the Cruisers. This guy's name is Michael Pear, but he's Eddie and even back then I was like, hey, it's Eddie from Eddie and the Cruisers. And I don't know, I've never known his name, but anytime we bring this up, I just call him Eddie from Eddie and the Cruisers.
In the notes that you don't even mention Faye Grant.
No.
Wow. Faye Grant was, so I'm watching this again, which you can get right now in 2018 on the Con TV app, which I found through Roku. And I saw Faye Grant. I'm like, wow, she looks really familiar. Why does she look really familiar? She looks really familiar. Oh my gosh. So a year after, she was only on for the first 2 seasons. So while the 3rd season was airing, she was actually doing V instead, the miniseries of V. And so she went from being this high school kid to being the science doctor in the next, wow.
And if you didn't, growing up in the 80s, if V was like an event, like it was publicized everywhere. I mean, it was like a major television event, and people were talking about it. I mean, this was like the science fiction at the time. And I was really into that show. And I honestly don't know how or why that ended. And we don't need to get into it in this show, but it just seems like one year everyone was talking about it, and the next year it was just gone. Like that was it. Never heard from it again. Is that fair? Or do you know more about what happened there?
Yeah, well, you know as much as I do that it was put together using a bunch of old Star Wars set parts, and the effects for TV weren't all that great. And once you got to the end of the first season, because it was on for 2 seasons, I think. Once it was on for the second season, you've kind of gone through the story, and our love of ending events, world-ending events, wasn't what it is today, you know, like with The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, where you can watch this year after year after year. And I think if the effects were a little bit better back then, it would have lasted longer. Now, that said, they tried to revise the IP in 2009. It only ran for a season until ABC canceled it. Once again, the reason why I wait 3 years before or 3 seasons, 3 successful seasons before I watch anything. I think I would have watched V anyway, because I watched the originals live back then.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the Greatest American Hero, though.
Oh, yeah. Hey, we're talking about the Greatest American Hero.
I was watching this. I've watched more than half of the episodes right now. And at first I was thinking, wow, this is a little hokey, but I'm getting into it. By the time I'm into the second season, I'm into it. Like, okay, I'm back to the 80s, and this is how I liked my TV and that sort of thing. Well, my wife walks in the room. She sees me watching it. She watched the show as a kid, and she watches it for 2 minutes. And then she looks at me and goes, wow, I didn't remember TV in the 80s being this bad. It's like, okay, well, you pulled me back out of my, of me thinking this might be the best series of the 80s. I think it was good just because it was an everyday guy who actually had his head about him, William Catt as Ralph Hinckley. And that draws you into it. And then Robert Culp, who really is, if you don't know anything about the series, Robert Culp really was the linchpin of the series that kept it going for so long. As a matter of fact,
yeah, he was really good.
The last episode was written, produced, and directed by him. And it was basically a story about him being the star of this revolution like 30 years before. So the last episode didn't even focus on the Greatest American Hero. It focused on Robert Culp. Now, following the third season, they did shoot a pilot episode, which again was written, produced, and directed by Robert Culp, called The Greatest American Heroine. And they were going to transition the suit from William Catt to a woman. And in a lot of the box DVD sets, which I do not own, you can actually get a hold of that pilot and watch that pilot.
Yeah, and it is available, I think, on YouTube. You can watch it. If I'm not mistaken, it was Holly Hathaway, I think, was the name of the character who was supposed to be. I think she was like a veterinarian. And I've got the first season on DVD, and I don't know that they ever. It was one of those ones where you buy it and then they don't ever release like any more of them, and you're sitting there waiting. And I'm probably waiting to this day. But I did pick that up, and I think it is included on there. So yeah, and we'll kind of come back to this. I want to come back to that because there's lately there's some talk about a reboot, and we'll kind of talk about what that looks like. But Jeremy, is this a TV show? I know you said you're a little bit younger than us, but did you catch this growing up? And if not, how much did you get into this for the homework stuff?
I was aware of it as a kid. And obviously I was aware of the theme song, which is one of the greatest theme songs of TV history.
Hold that thought, because we're coming back to that too.
You've listened to that over and over and over, watching 20 plus episodes, you get your fill of it.
Right.
It's still timeless. Okay. I don't care what you say.
I only watched the pilot today, and it...
You can be honest. It's okay.
The acting wasn't the best.
That was the whole series, wasn't just the pilot.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I get a lot of what SB was saying with, it's like an ordinary guy who is actually a really good guy. He works with these, they call it like special ed kids. But
they called it special ed.
And they were on the short bus.
It was really more,
they were.
It was like they were troubled kids. Nowadays special ed has a whole different meaning.
Exactly.
But, he's a good guy. He's trying to do good work. His coworkers are all kind of disenfranchised, and, he's still trying to help. And then he comes into these, the suit. So it's a really good, premise. The execution just wasn't there for, the special effects. I mean, early 80s TV special effects. It's
no such thing.
Yeah. I wasn't, turned away because of that. It was more just the acting.
There's an episode in the second season where they're in some tropical island place, which, by the way, it gets a little bit unbelievable in the middle of season 2. Like, the whole thing doesn't get unbelievable, but they're traveling to all these exotic places. They go to a ski resort. They go to multiple tropical islands, and they go to Hawaii. It's like, wow, you guys, I wish I had your life, sort of thing. And the FBI guy, Robert Culp, as Bill Maxwell, he's got a government salary, and Ralph Hinckley is a teacher, is a special ed teacher. He eventually becomes vice principal. But there's this scene where they're talking about special effects, where they're getting run over. They're in a dinghy and they're getting run over by this cabin cruiser sort of boat. And the greatest American hero saves his girlfriend, which is Connie Selleck, and Robert Culp, by throwing them out of the dinghy. And then he gets out of the way of the boat, and then he literally runs the boat down in order to stop it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Boy.
I would say that I like when they when he was first learning to fly, and he would try, and you would hear the music start and then stop, and then start and then stop, and then finally when he flies, you get the full music. That was blazing. That was a nice piece of editing there.
I mean, this show, the whole appeal was really about the suit itself, and we won't get into some of if you go into the production notes of this show, there was always this struggle between the studio at the time was really wanting to do more superhero stuff, and the Stephen Cannell, I think his name is Cannell. Yeah, he was really kind of going for the everyman. Let's focus on his kind of plight and really get down into the nuts and bolts of like Ralph Hinckley and Bill Maxwell. And again, the studio was they were kind of getting pulled in different ways, and so some of that kind of came out in the show. But really, the appeal was the fact that he had this suit, and you knew it had powers. You weren't sure what kind of powers it had, because the story goes, he's out in the desert, and I'm going to really condense this down for a lack of time, but he's out in the desert. He gets the aliens visit, and they basically drop off a spacesuit, or a superhero suit. And as he's leaving the desert, he drops the instruction booklet. So he no longer has an ability he doesn't know how the suit works. He doesn't know the limits of its powers. And so it was kind of one of these things. It was a carrot that was dangled in front of you throughout the entire series of, okay, what new power is he going to learn? And then, how is he going to deal with that, and that kind of thing. And so by the end of the series, I mean, he had he could fly, he had super strength, invulnerability, invisibility. He had ESP, telekinesis, X-ray vision, pyrotechnesis, psychometry. He could shrink. He had X-ray vision. I mean, this just went on and on and on with all these different powers that he had. But more importantly, he had an amazing, amazing perm. And so I threw this question out there of like, who else? This was kind of par for course in the 80s. Like, my dad had a perm, and I'm talking about William Catt here, who played Ralph Hinckley. But there was the man perm was like a big thing. You had like Freddie Mercury had it at one point.
David Hasselhoff
had a little bit going on there. We talked about the hockey players and having, like, you've seen those guys with the mullets, with the
Funny
mullet
enough,
perms
my
going
nephew
on.
plays hockey in Minnesota. And
does he have one?
Yes, last year he had one. My sister showed.
That's a true sign of a hockey player.
My sister showed me a picture of him. Like, we went to the hairdresser, and I saw it, and I was, oh my God, what did you do? What did you do? And he kept it for like half the year. I
mean, this was so, and I'm kind of half joking there. Well, I'm all joking there, but the man perm was alive and well in this series. The other thing that I don't remember who touched on it. I think it was you, Jeremy, but the song right. So I had this question out there: what was bigger, the show or the song? In SP, do you have an opinion?
Yeah,
one way
after
or the other?
watching half of the 45 episodes, the song was bigger than the show. I mean, the show a little bit iconic, but if it was bigger than the song, then we would have seen it around a lot more than we have seen it. We would have seen a interest in rebooting it, especially since the Marvel Cinematic Universe blew up since 2008. And yes, there's been talk, but nothing has actually pulled it all the way through. And there, by the way, is a ton of legal battles in this character and in the show's history. I mean, DC sued him for a lot of stuff, and they successfully fought back. It's a landmark case, actually, in terms of entertainment law, because they were saying this looks too much like Superman, and the ruling came back, it is derivative and distinct enough on its own that it is its own entity and they do not owe you any royalties. So there was a lot for the show, but you don't see the show around anymore. You don't really see William Catt going around and making appearances. You hear the song all the time.
Right.
Yeah. Jeremy, do you think the song was, I'm going to guess the song was probably bigger given.
Oh, yeah. And I was just looking and it actually hit number 2 on the Billboard chart in the 80s.
Absolutely.
And, it actually, there was another chart that hit number 1, but that's, I mean, you couldn't go without hearing the song. It was just one of those, it was everywhere, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's iconic. And the full song title is Theme from the Greatest American Hero. Parentheticals is Believe It or Not. And like you said, it was performed by Joey Scarberry. Like you said, it hit number 2. He's actually got some other hits. If anyone is interested in what else Joey Scarberry has done, listen to Love Me the Last Time, Some of My Old Friends, and then he did the song. He came back, did a theme song in 1983 for Castle and McCormick, the back-to-back song. I don't know if you guys were fans of that particular show, but that's another good one too. And they really try to capitalize on his voice, because that intro for Hard Castle and McCormick was 1 minute and 30 seconds. So when you go back, which is unheard of, right? No one does this. I mean, the longest we get is like, I'm trying to think of like Game of Thrones is probably only 30 seconds long for their intro.
These days, you're lucky if you even get an intro.
Right. Yeah. And they were like trying to milk his
these
voice
episodes in the 80s, by the way, were 49, 50 minutes long versus now they're 42, 43. So the production value alone of the show was allowing for a lot less tighter cuts. So there's a lot of scenes where cars are driving up and you see long shots of that, whereas today you wouldn't. I mean, that's time that you don't.
I noticed that as I was watching it.
Yeah, and it's all because of they had 49 or 50 minutes to fill versus 42.
Much like we do on this show. The other thing we mentioned is there's a reboot coming. At least it's been talked about. I think officially right now it's on hiatus. But at one point earlier in the year, late last year, ABC had the rights to it, and they were actually, I think Hannah Simone was the actress that had been signed on, and she is the one that's she's known as Cece from New Girl. I don't know if you guys watch that show. Gorgeous lady, and she's actually really funny. I think she's great in that. Well, everybody in that show is awesome. It's no longer on the air, but New Girl, yeah, Cece was the one that was supposed to play this. So, and over the years, like Jim Carrey was involved, Jack Black, Lord and Miller, who did the Lego movie, and then were acts from the Han Solo movie. Those guys they've all had their hands in it and talked about doing a reboots over the years. So there's a lot of people that still are holding on to this for one reason or another. They want to try to capitalize on this. And maybe it's because of the whole Marvel Cinema Universe and looking for a way to kind of ride that wave in whatever way they can. Before we move on, because I want to make sure we get enough time to talk about Transformers, there's one last thing I do want to mention, the logo itself, because the logo was always iconic. You see it everywhere. It's blasted all over all the DVD sets and all the releases that they've done. It was the one thing that, when you see it, it's very visible. It's recognizable, the brand itself. And the history, there's a couple different versions, but if you go from the actual writer, it was inspired after a pair of scissors that he had on his desk. They were cramming, trying to figure out what they were going to make the logo, and he saw a pair of scissors on his desk and said, "You know what? That's it. That's the logo." The other version is it looks very similar to the Chinese symbol for, I think, middle, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. But the reason I bring that up, not because of the history so much, but the logo is seen in the Ready Player One movie. Wade at the very end on his visor, there's a couple scenes where he kind of turns, I think, to his left, if I'm not mistaken, and you can see that Greatest American Hero logo. He's got a sticker right there.
It does
on there
look different.
well.
Like at the end of the series, you see the aliens, which look like sliced noodles, by the way, from Star Wars. Yeah,
from Star Wars,
and you see a different version, a different color of it. It's like blue on white, and it's the same shape, but it looks different because of the different coloration. Also, it's shinier.
All right. Well, let's go to Star Trek, the original series. So this is from, and we don't need to lead this in, right? I think everybody knows the original series. So 1966 to 1969, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei. Oh my. Walter Koenig. These guys are all well-known, incredible people. This is an incredible show, at least in my opinion. But I just want to kind of touch on some, because this will come up again later. Don't worry. We're going to get into more Star Trek. In fact, it's for Chapter 6, I think we're talking about the original series. We'll come back and talk about Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, all of that's coming up. So we're going to get into a lot of this later. But going back and looking at the original series, I wanted to start off with the one thing that always stood out to me as a kid was that whole intro about space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Starship Enterprise, etc. I saw this in syndication. Obviously, I wasn't alive. Just for the record, I wasn't alive when this came out. But I did see this when it came out, like on reruns and syndication later on. It was probably about the mid to late 80s, wow. I think. And that, or no, 70s, sorry. Mid to late 70s is when I think I saw it. It may have been the early 80s, but definitely not any time past 82. There's a marker there for me, so I know. But the intro and the song were always, I don't know, for whatever reason, they were just like, I waited for that. And I love the fact that they're still using that intro and even the music to some extent. Even with the newer movies, they still have found a way to incorporate that. But SP, just thinking back to Star Trek, I'm we've talked about this. I know you're a fan of the show. When did you really get into the original series, and what were some of the things that really kind of stood out for you for this?
So I watched it with my dad when it was on, and he was a huge Star Trek fan, and I just liked it myself. I watched it when it kept on coming back in syndication over and over and over again. Pretty much memorized all 79 episodes, 80 hours, by the way, because there's 1 2-hour episode, but 79 episodes, 3 seasons.
Touché.
And it was just iconic in probably the thing that really forced me to think about what I wanted to do with life. And if I could fly around in a starship, I would, but I can't.
Who wouldn't? Yeah. I would love to do that.
So
too. This
was just an amazing, I didn't realize how much of a first that this series really was. I mean, you had the first interracial kiss. You had this international crew on board.
Crew, yeah. That was huge back then.
It was, and people don't understand what the mentality of the Americans were in the late 60s. I mean, we were full on Cold War back then. So having a Russian on board was a big deal. And the interracial thing, I mean, the episode...
Bold
the episode where you had the race with white on one side and black on the other, and then vice versa. And that whole thing where they destroyed their whole world just because of the differences in their skin color. I mean, they made a lot of headway in TV, and they used sci-fi to do that. And that was Gene Roddenberry. That was his vision of the future. And he wanted to point out that there were things that were wrong with society and they need to be fixed.
Jeremy, was this, when did you catch this, or did you catch this growing up? And are you a big fan of the Star Trek series in general?
I'm much more of a fan of Next Generation, but I did catch the original series in syndication, probably much like you. I think it was on like Saturdays or Sunday afternoons on like a local station when I was growing up.
And they would show like 3 or 4 back to back. It wasn't just like one episode. They just like cram a whole bunch of them, in that
it would
block.
be like that. And so I don't know if I've ever seen all of them or all of them in order, but I do enjoy the shows. And it's funny how the effects from the show in the 60s are much better than the one from Greatest American Hero.
Right.
But I mean, you're talking practical effects versus visual effects. So
yeah.
Well, okay, let's not get carried away. But yeah, okay.
Well, for effects, Star Trek, though.
No, I was making fun. I know what American Hero. I don't.
Yeah, but I do enjoy the original series a lot. Particularly, I guess more the movies that came later. But it is a fun series. I've watched a few of the redone ones where they like all the special effects have been redone with modern, like modern effects.
Yep. Yeah.
But
the so we're gonna do a real quick little game here, and it doesn't have to be very long. But SP, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. There are a number of technologies that came from the original Star Trek series. So I'm going to ask you whether or not is this something that we have today, or B, or I guess, and two, in your opinion, do you think we'll ever get there?
Yeah,
Does that make
makes sense. But before you do that, let me just state really quickly that Gene Roddenberry only put technology in that were actually thought of as being feasible at some point in time in the mid to near future. So these were things that Gene Roddenberry knew were eventually going to come out to everybody.
All right. Well, that's fair. So the first one's holodecks.
All right.
Do we have them, and are we going to have them ever?
We kind of have them with virtual reality right now, but we don't have the full effect. So I think everybody would love to have them. And I think the techno geeks out there will continue to develop until we actually have one.
All right. We're going to put a check mark next to that one. Tricorders.
Okay. So what are the three things that tricorders do? Sense, they have a computer to compute things, and record. Yeah, we have drones. So yeah, we have tricorders.
Good deal. Warp drive.
No, not even close.
Not even close. You think we'll ever get there?
We might, but we need some technological revolutions, which...
Isn't it really just about the energy?
Well, you got energy. I mean, you've got the whole science of folding space, and I don't know if we're going to get there in the next 100 or 200 years, but stranger things have happened.
All right. Well, we're going to mark an X on that one. How about a replicator?
We are really close to having that right now.
Really?
Yeah, because we have carbon nanotube membranes that are really close to being able to be 3D printed, basically, and replicate different things. So, yeah, we're close to that.
All right. This is the one I don't believe in, but hey, I could be wrong. Transporters.
Quantum transport is possible, but we're not close to actually doing it on any sort of scale.
Yeah, okay. I believe you. So what if there's a fly? Do I turn into the fly?
Yes, you absolutely turn into a fly. Either that or you would turn into Jeff Goldblum. I'm not sure. One of the two.
Okay, yeah. I think that'd be great. I'd love to have his chest.
I liked how the Enterprise series addressed that, because at that stage, transporters were still, like for humans, was still kind of new and untrusted.
Yeah, I don't think I'd trust them even 1,000 years from now, to be honest. Cloaking devices.
Let's see. Are we talking about the acoustic cloaking, the visual cloaking, or like the
F-35
electromagnetic waves, radar and IR? We have...
I was thinking helicarrier type
So
cloaking.
we have some of this stuff today, but we don't have the whole package put together. I mean, the amount of energy to visually obscure something is phenomenal. You think warp drive is big. Visual cloaking is big too.
All right. And the last one's a universal translator, which I think we've got this, right? I mean, isn't this just dragon typing?
Google Pixel brought it out.
Google Pixel, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, 2017.
Well, even just the Skype has added it now. You can talk to someone in English and have it come on the other side as Chinese.
Really?
Yep.
What do you think?
It's Skype, so it probably isn't that good, but you know, it's there.
No offense, Microsoft. We're just
I'm a podcaster. There's plenty of offense.
Yeah, there's plenty of offense there for Skype. All right. The last thing I think we'll talk about here, at least for Star Trek right now, is I wanted to go back to the theme song, because this was something new to me, and maybe you guys knew this already, but the theme from Star Trek by Alexander Courage, it was inspired by Beyond the Blue Horizon. If you get a chance, there's a 1950s version out there by Jeanette MacDonald. And if you listen to it, you can definitely hear where the inspiration came from, right? This is the song that plays at the very beginning and it plays at the very end of the credits of the original series. But I didn't know there were lyrics that Gene Roddenberry had written. Did you guys know this?
No.
Yep.
Yeah. So without further ado, I'm just going to read these off to you. Beyond the rim of the starlight, my love is wandering in star flight. I know he'll find the star-clustered reaches. Love, strange love, a star woman teaches. I know his journey never ends. His Star Trek will go on forever. But tell him, while he wanders his starry sea, remember me. There you go.
Yep. It's so I'm not a big poet or lyrical guy in music, but I have heard that several times, and I think we're better off that is not in pop culture.
Right. Yeah. Just let the Congo drum go. All right. So let's get into the last part of this, and I promise we'll come back to more Star Trek. We gotta get to the Transformer stuff here. But before we do, we're going to talk about the GoBots. And so the Challenge of the GoBots was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, came out between 1984 and 1985, in between those 2 years. And Jeremy, let me ask you, I know you're a big Transformers guy, but how much do you know about the GoBots? Are they a close second for you?
They are, in the realm of giant 80s robots, they are probably 7th or 8th.
Okay, no, that's fair. Because they're probably like 95th for me. They were, it was a cartoon that I watched only because it was on, and it was either watch cartoons or go do something else, and I chose cartoons. So I did watch this growing up, and excuse me, I didn't really understand, and I don't think I much cared as a kid what the origin of the GoBots were. They were always the second, the poor man's Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
They were the stupid toy you got when all the Transformers were sold out, and mom and dad couldn't find them. So you end up getting a GoBot. And I mean, no offense to anybody, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are huge GoBot fans. Yeah. I mean, it's got a huge following and all that, but I just could never get into these guys. And I think one of the biggest problems I had with this cartoon was there was Guardians and there was Renegades. And with Transformers, they made it pretty easy for me. I could see the Decepticon logo. I can see the Autobot logo. Mm-hmm. But here, you know, who the heck was what? Like, I didn't know who was a Guardian versus who was a Renegade. And how could you tell the difference here?
Yeah, I don't think you really could. I mean, it's just there's no symbol or anything as far as I know. I think later some people have come up with something, but you know, on the toys they were just, you know, you had a cycle and you had Leader 1, and one was a plane, one was a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah, that was about all. SP, did you get into the GoBots growing up?
You know, I was a kid that spent way too much time in front of the TV. But fortunately, I think by the time the GoBots came out, I was interested in other things. And I think I chose to do other things rather than watch the GoBots, but I did watch Transformers. So I think the GoBots were so hokey that I did not watch them.
I mean, part of that's the Hanna-Barbera. And if you look back, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, there's so many cartoons that Hanna-Barbera did that were very hokey and corny. Mm-hmm. And they have a special place in my heart. You know, I still love them to death. The GoBots, there's probably room for them in there. It never really caught on with me. And for the sake of, you know, this show and, you know, just kind of my own knowledge, I went back and tried to really piece together the origin story, because for Transformers it's all very clean and simple, and I can, you know, spout it off at the drop of a hat. But the GoBot stuff, it always eluded me. Like, I didn't understand who they were, and I won't get into the whole story, but you know, they were beings at one point, and they found a way to transfer their life force into,
they were like cyborgs, not really robots.
Cyborgs, right? Yeah, and then there was something else that they used called the what was it called? I forget, the modifier. Sorry, the modifier, right? And the modifier allowed them to transform into vehicles and all that. But I just, you know, it was 1 year prior to Transformers finally coming out. I think it came out that same year, right? If not right after. And once the Transformers came out, I think like most of, you know, America and all that, we just moved on from the GoBots. But I'll throw this out there. Did you have a favorite GoBot, Jeremy, growing up?
It would have to be Leader 1.
Yeah. He's mine too.
I mean, he's the jet.
Yeah, exactly. He was an F-15 jet, and the only thing I remember at the time was, cool, he looks like Starscream, Thundercracker, or Skywarp, so he was my favorite. Right. I didn't care for Psykill, and I probably could name, I thought the Porsche guy, I forget his name, I thought he was cool looking.
I can't remember. I remember there was like that scooter guy that...
Yep. Yeah. And I remember Turbo. Turbo was another one too that I think was a big important character.
Baron Von Joy was the Porsche.
Was he?
Yeah.
Dad wouldn't. I was going with Bill. I don't think Baron Von Joy was.
Well, and then there was Crasher, who was the lady renegade, because she had the lipstick lips.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And it's funny because GoBots actually came out before Transformers, and even they both had movies. Mm-hmm. You know, we're going to talk about Transformers the movie in just a minute, but GoBots had Battle of the Rock Lords that came out. Never saw it. Did you either one of you guys catch Battle of the Rock Lords?
I know I've seen it. I could not recall anything about it.
All right. Well, it's a sad story.
There is something about GoBots I could mention that just happened at San Diego Comic-Con this year.
Yeah, please do, because we got to give these guys a bone somewhere.
So IDW Publishing does the comics for all the Hasbro titles. They've done Transformer comics since like 2006. They have just announced a GoBots miniseries that's going to be coming out. I don't know if they've announced a date yet, but it's going to be coming out by Tom Scioli, who's done in the last few years, he did a Transformers versus G.I. Joe that was just kind of off the walls crazy. I mean, it was
fanboy kind of thing.
No. I mean, he's heavily influenced by Jack Kirby. So if you picture Jack Kirby doing Transformers versus G.I. Joe, on my podcast, out of the 4 of our hosts, me and one of the other guys love it, and the other 2 guys hate it. So I mean, it's very diverse or divisive, but yeah, I think it's great. And then he's doing a GoBots miniseries coming up that he's writing it, doing the art and everything. So
I follow a couple different folks on Twitter, and there's one picture that keeps coming up on my feeds, and it's a picture of, I believe it's Leader 1, and in his reflection you can see Cycle, and it looks like it's a more modern piece. Do you know, is that what we're talking about here?
That might be. I mean, I know the piece of art I've seen that they've promoted is Leader 1's head.
That's probably it, because it just came out of nowhere, and again, it keeps circling and it keeps popping up in different feeds, and I'm like, where's this coming from? Where is this resurgence of the GoBots, and why is it hitting my feed? Get it out of here, kind of thing.
I don't know. I mean, the GoBots is really weird because Hasbro owns the license or the likenesses of the characters in the fiction stuff. Bandai owns the actual toys because Tonka licensed it in the 80s, and then when Hasbro bought Tonka, they didn't, since Tonka didn't own GoBots outright, Hasbro only got the pieces that Tonka owned. So Hasbro will never put out a Leader 1 that looked like he did in the 80s. They've used the name over and over, but I don't know what the point is of this comic, but but hey,
it's coming out. Right?
It's coming out, and I think it'll be fun.
I'm mildly curious about what it's going to be and who all's going to be in it, I guess, just to maybe give them a second chance here. I threw the other question out here of what happened to the GoBots. Does anybody know? Like, it just seems like, again, after 85, we're done. No comics, no, I mean, I'm detached from it all right now, but
they got destroyed by Transformers and Voltron and even Robotech probably.
Yeah, the animation was just, it was very simple and very younger. It would survive like on a Nick Jr. probably channel nowadays, but it wouldn't survive an anime channel.
The GoBots. All right. That's enough for the GoBots. Let's get to the Transformers. All right. So Transformers 1984, 1987 is when the original, and we're only going to go into G1, right? And so the first generation of Transformers, at least for the sake of the show and sake of time, because there's a lot more Transformers out there. But I got to ask you, Jeremy, right out of the gate, what the heck happened to Hauler?
To Hauler?
Do you remember Hauler?
I remember Hauler.
He's the crane that came in one freaking episode where I don't remember who was down in the cavern, and they lowered it down there. They picked him up. He had like 1 line, 2 lines, and never, and to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this dude ever came back to the cartoon.
That was probably because he had a toy coming out, and so much of the cartoon was Hasbro saying, we need you to focus on, this set of toys.
Yeah.
The Marvel Comics actually was a lot worse with that, where, you had characters coming in and out, but at least they did get a little bit more characterization.
The, as far as the Transformers go, and, obviously huge impact on your life. You're now doing a podcast for that, but what did the Transformers mean for you? And about how old were you, I guess, at this point, if you don't mind telling us when this finally hit? What was that life like for you as a kid?
I was 6 in 84. So
Wow.
I was like prime age for all the marketing and everything.
Yeah.
So it was, I can remember the first Transformers that I got was Devastator. My mom got it at like a yard sale or something, but it was the whole gift set. I got the entire combiner. Devastator has these construction vehicles that they're their own Transformers, but then they combine into this one big robot. And it's just...
And for the record, he was just Devastator. He was not Construction Devastator, which is, I think they called him in the movies, which was dumb. I don't know why they even did that, but go on. Sorry.
No. It was just you have so much play in these. You have your vehicles, and then you have the robots, and then on some of them, like this one, you can combine them into an even better robot. And it was just something that you haven't really seen before. And then you have the TV show, which really came about because of like deregulation on like children's programming in the 80s. So essentially you have a 30-minute commercial, for these things, which even spurns your imagination, even further. So it was just all consuming as a kid. I had probably mostly Transformers and maybe a handful of GoBots, because GoBots were a lot less expensive. And, most parents...
you get them in the clearance bin.
Yeah, most parents, they're like, a robot's a robot. And we're like, this is the bad one.
Right. Yeah, this is not the one I asked for.
But,
SP, for you growing up, were you big into Transformers?
I am nowhere as big in Transformers as Jeremy was, but I did watch the series and I did have a lot of Transformers. I had the Optimus Prime, the G1 Optimus Prime. Still have it today, the one with the semi back with the little robot in it. I had
Roller
Jetfire, which I still have. They're both not in
Skyfire. Oh, wait, no, Jetfire. I mean, Dark Skyfire. Oh, wait, no.
I like Jetfire because by the time I got Jetfire, it was 1985, and that was Robotech, and basically that was the Veritech in Robotech was Jetfire. So it was great to have that toy, and it was die-cast metal. It was very well put together. You did have some plastic parts in there, which, of course, broke, which I don't really have it all in one piece anymore. But the Transformers I had friends that had different ones. I had different ones. So we'd all get together and play for a year or two. And mind you, I was older. I was not 6. I had about 10 years to that. So it was an iconic thing that there was G.I. Joe out. There was this. I mean, I was born probably about 10 years too soon, because I passed through a lot of these golden age of toys and cartoon series way too fast. And because I was in high school and in college when a lot of this stuff was happening. But
that says a lot too about the show, right? I mean, if you were 16 years old and you're still, this caught your interest enough that you were, picking up the toys and all that, I think it's a statement to just how popular they were, how available they were, right? It appealed to a lot of different boys, and I'm sure girls at that time. Honestly, we won't get into this. I wanted to, and we're just kind of short on time, but there's a whole history here, right, in terms of how all this came together. And it's a number of different toy lines that they've kind of Frankenstein for the American release when it finally launched. And that's why you have some that are robots, and then you've got others like Megatron, who was like this gun, or Soundwave, who was like a tape recorder. And it's because, again, they were two different toy lines that they just kind of merged together and released here in the US. But I wanted to talk about, let's get to the cartoon itself. So the actual cartoon ran a total of 4 seasons 1 through 4. And then right smack dab in the middle there was a movie. And Jeremy, I guess let's just talk about the seasons in general. Season 1 and season 2 had a huge impact on my life. Yeah. I mean, this was looking back, and we were kind of talking about this before we came on the air. There's a lot of things that, there's some errors in some of the characters kind of disappearing, coming back. Coloring was wrong. Sometimes the voice acting, you would see a Transformer's mouth move, but really they weren't talking at that time. There's all these things that as a kid, I never focused on any of that stuff. And looking back now at some of these seasons, some of the stories were super hokey, right? There's some where they're falling in love with people. There's one where they're surfing at one point. I mean,
there's one where Optimus Prime plays basketball.
Yeah, that's a great one. And there's another one where Blitzkrieg fires a football out of his cannon later on. So, but there's, apart from all of that, if you had to summarize some of the highlights of season 1, what would you hit on there?
I would probably just say the first mini series that opened it that's
the more than meets the eye.
It's I believe it was a 5-part miniseries that just kind of that origin story is still basically the origin story that almost all the iterations of Transformers has come back to in some level. I mean, they change things here and there, but it's just straightforward. I mean, it's like an energy crisis on Cybertron, and the Autobots are leaving and looking for another energy source. The Decepticons follow them. And it just, when I go back and watch the first season in particular, that's pretty much what I watch. And
just that first arc, you mean?
Yeah, it's just, I don't really watch a lot of the other season 1 episodes all that much. I mean, there's a few like Dinobots and stuff.
Yeah, Dinobots.
I get those, but I don't know. I believe season 1 was shorter too. I mean, season 2 was incredibly long, and season 3 was incredibly long, and season 4 was 3 episodes.
3 episodes.
Yeah,
total.
But
the fight between Optimus and Megatron at the end of season 1 stood out for me too. Just because that was their first showdown officially, right?
The one on the dam.
Yeah. Or is it on the dam? Is that the one where he takes the energy from all of the other Decepticons?
Oh, I think I'm thinking of a different one. It's been so long since I've actually watched a lot of these because I'm so ingrained in the comics now. I'm like, that is my big fiction.
No, that's fair.
But yeah, I know what you're talking about, where Megatron steals the energy from the other Decepticons.
Right. And then they find out that he cheated, and then all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And they run him off, so to speak. In looking back, it just kind of even in season 1, this would be a reoccurring thing for all of the seasons, and really the Transformers in general, was they gave all of these characters personalities, which I thought was really neat. Right, everyone, they had different accents, they had different personalities, different quirks. Some were grumpy, some were happy, some were pacifists, some were lovers, some were scientists. Right, they had backgrounds and special abilities and strengths and weaknesses and all of that, which is really cool as a kid. It's one of the first cartoons that I remember they went that far. And don't get me wrong, these weren't like cutting edge, deep characters by any means or stretch of the imagination, but they were enough that, it was made it easier to identify them, right? And kind of memorize and learn their names and all of that.
Well, and for the most part, that came from Marvel Comics. They, Bob Budiansky from Marvel did pretty much all of the tech specs and all the bios on the toys. And that pretty much became, for the most part, what you saw in the cartoon followed that. Yeah. So that's probably why they, compared to GoBots, where, Hanna-Barbera did what they did. This was
they were all flat. Yeah, they were just all kind of one-dimensional compared to the Transformers.
A fleshed out thing from, people at Marvel that are used to doing, fleshed out characters and big stories.
Gotcha. No, that makes a total sense. And there's one other thing too that I remember growing up. And this is probably late 80s. I finally got a chance to see, and it was probably on VHS or something. I got a copy of like one of the Japanese versions of the Transformers cartoon. And one of the things that, and probably the only thing that I really recall from it, was the fact that they would yell "transform" in the Japanese version, where in America we got the Transforming sound.
Yeah, was the version you watched dubbed in English, or was it subtitled?
I can't remember. I just distinctly remember they would yell "transform" and then they would just go down. Right, we didn't get the little. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not going to try to impersonate the sound that we got.
I don't even have my soundboard plugged up, where I could play it for you.
But yeah, there was just a noticeable difference, and I have to say I like the American version better because I grew up with it. But I didn't care for them yelling that every time they decided to transform.
Yeah, the music on the Japanese versions is different too, and it's just, I don't know, it's weird because the version we got is so iconic. But there's a horribly, like, so bad it's good dubbed version of the Japanese series that, like, after it went off the air in the US, there were still like 3 or 4 series in Japan. There was like Headmasters,
Target Masters.
Well, no, Target Masters was in the Headmaster series, and there was
Victory, and
I'm blanking on the last one, but there were like three series, and then there were manga and stuff. But there, I think it was a company in Singapore dubbed them into English, and like when the character had a face place, the actor was talking like this with their hand over their mouth, and
the whole time.
Yeah, and the names were all wrong. Like Blaster was called Billy, and the Matrix was called.
Wait,
the
I've
Power
seen this
Pack.
version. Yeah, I've seen this. I've seen clips of it, and I thought it was fake. I didn't realize this was real.
That is real. Look up the Stardust.
Billy, that's right. It was Rodimus Prime, I think it was in that scene, or at least Hot Rod. I don't know who it was at the time.
Yeah.
But.
And so you look up the Star Dub if you ever want to see it. It is hilarious. And, you know, a lot of people that are big Transformer fans don't like it, but for me, it's just so bad it's good.
In season 2, there were a number of things. We had the Autobot X or Autobot Spike or whatever his name was. I don't know what the hell was going on there. Yep. We got a lot of Cybertron, which I thought was cool because, they hint at it. You get to see it at the beginning of the first season, and they make mention of it, obviously, throughout. I think Megatron gets warped there at one point. But we got to see a lot more of Cybertron. We've got Omega Supreme. This is when they first introduced us to like Alpha. Is it Alpha Trion? If I remember, Elita 1, right? All of that. There was a lot of mythology there, I guess, for lack of a better term.
You get female Transformers.
Yeah, for the first time there. And then right after that, like you said, I know season 2 ran a lot longer than season 1, but then here comes the movie, which I was all in on this sucker, man. I remember going to the theater, and I remember walking out of that theater crying like a baby because Optimus Prime had died. And not only him, but they just wiped out a lot of that first generation, the first and second season Transformers on both sides. Really, it wasn't just the Autobots, right?
They kind of pretty much house. The 84, 85 toys were gone.
Yep, time to make some new toys.
Yeah, so is that really what drove that? Was the fact that it was all merchandising kind of thing?
Hasbro saw it basically as marketing. They did not know what they had until they started getting all the complaints from parents because their kids were traumatized because Optimus Prime died.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't just Optimus Prime. And it was very gruesome how some of these, like, Prowl was shot and you saw smoke come out of his mouth. And
Ironhide got a bullet to the head.
Yeah. And these were characters that for a couple of years, kids would come home from school and they would be babysat practically, by the TV. And, from a number of Transformers conventions that I've been to talking to other fans, there are a lot of fans that were like, Optimus Prime was kind of my father figure.
Oh, ouch.
Because they're, latchkey kids and whatnot. Then you go to the movie and within, 10, 15 minutes, he's gone. That's traumatic. I mean, that was like a seminal moment in my childhood was, going to see that. It's just one of those things that sticks out.
So SP for you, I mean, if my math is right, you're hitting about 18, 19 years old at this point. Did you go check this out in the movie theater?
Did I? I think I did. But I was spoiled on it going into it. And so I knew Optimus Prime would die because somebody was like, you're not going to like this movie. Why am I not going to like this movie? Well, I don't want to spoil it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go see it unless you tell me why. So I knew that Optimus Prime was going to die. And I was like, I don't want to go see it. Yeah, but it's Transformers. You should go see it. I think I just got talked into go seeing it. And it was definitely a different spectacle. I think this might have been the first TV show animation series that I saw on the big screen. And I liked it for that aspect. Also, Jeremy, question for you. The Touch, best song ever or just the best song on the soundtrack?
I would say it's best song ever.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Best song ever.
Really? Okay.
The soundtrack it's one of the best soundtracks you could get from particularly an animated movie. But you have Weird Al on it. You have
Lion.
I mean, a lot of these groups I'd never heard of, but the Vince DiCola doing the instrumental stuff.
Yeah, Rocky IV, right. Vince DiCola.
And, you can't beat the soundtrack.
Yeah. You also had Dare. Dare is another great.
Yeah.
So that's
Sam Bush
again.
Who, I don't know if it'll be before or after this, but there's a convention in the UK, and he's making his UK Transformers convention premiere at TF Nation in this August.
Is he going to perform something or just?
Yeah, he's doing a concert there too. So
yeah, there's we mentioned this. I think just leading up to the show, we were kind of talking about a few things, but the Cybertronic Spree is a band. They're a great Transformers band. So they dress up in costumes. So you got Hot Rod, RC, Rumble, Soundwave, Unicron, Bumblebee. They've got a Quintesson and then Shockwave. And so they're all up on stage and they have these cool looking costumes. And they just rock out and play a lot of like 80s, 90s theme songs. And of course, the Touch and Dare are definitely in there. So was the Transformers theme, which was performed by Lion. But if you get a chance, go check them out, support those guys. They're Canadian, so they always play in Canada for some weird reason. So I never really get to see them, and hopefully they'll get down to Austin.
Yeah, I haven't seen them in person.
Yeah, but great band. And we could honestly do a whole show on the movie itself because there's a lot of great moments in here. I think we've talked on a lot of them. The one shall stand, one shall fall line resonated with me as a kid. It was kind of my kick his ass Seabass kind of moment that never really played out the way I wanted it to. And there was some dull moments here too, like Wheelie. Get rid of that guy. Even in the movies, I couldn't stand him. And then we got like the Matrix and the passing of that to Ultra Magnus. I thought that was really cool, and he turned out to be not the person that would ultimately get it because Hot Rod would get it, and that led us to Rodimus Prime, who I liked. And I come to find out there's a lot of controversy here about there are a lot of people that feel that don't like Hot Rod because you could make the argument that he caused Optimus Prime to die, right?
Yeah, well, you can make the argument because it's true. But yeah, he.
So are you a fan of Hot Rod then? Or?
I like him. I didn't like him for years, but the comics have redeemed him. He's been like the main character of a comic that's been going in one form or another since 2012, and I am perfectly fine with Hot Rod now, but he did clearly cause Optimus Prime to die.
And I liked him even from the beginning, honestly. And I don't know what it was.
He's a cool looking car.
Yeah, absolutely. And the colors were cool. And I've seen some of the Transformers that have been done recently. I don't know. It's like the collector sets or the really big ones that with all the points of articulation and all that. They just it's just a really cool look for him.
Yeah.
And it could be the fact that it was Judd Nelson too that did his voice, and we didn't even really. I guess we can just quickly talk about that. I mean, you had Peter Cullen coming back. I mean, let me just get this out of the way. Peter Cullen and Frank Welker. Frank Welker being Megatron's voice. Those guys.
Also Fred from Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Fred from Scooby-Doo. That's right. But those guys, I mean, they sold it for me. I thought they were great, and Peter Cullen to this day is still amazing, right? He's just got God's voice for me. But you had Robert Stack, if you or anyone for the guy from Unsolved Mysteries. He was on there. We had Leonard Nimoy. Who am I forgetting? Orson Welles.
Yeah, in his last role.
As Unicron. Eric Idle as Wreck-Gar.
You had John Machida, the Micro Machines guy.
He's played Blur. Yeah. So a lot of great voice actors, and it was kind of a big deal because these guys were all prolific movie. Well, I don't know if you could call them prolific, but they were definitely well-known movie actors coming in and doing this cartoon at the height of its popularity. So it just had a lot of good things going for it, and it didn't get favorable reviews. I think as a kid, and my personal opinion, I think it's still an amazing movie. I've got a lot of sentimental value over it, but looking back, I don't know if it's really still holds up against the test of time.
I watch it very regularly.
Yeah. And I sprung for the VHS version in the 90s because when we got our version here, I think it was FHE?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they did their home release on VHS, and they took out the 2 swear words. And I remember as a kid, when I went to the theater, I was like, whoa, dang, these, they're dropping, D-bombs or whatever it was. And we never got that version here. So there was in the late 90s, there was a Canadian company, and I forget who it was now, but I just know I had to mail order this thing from Canada to get that version because it was the only version at the time that I could get my hands on that I had a player for that had the open damn it and S look what whatever that line is too. So
what are we gonna do now?
Yeah, what are we gonna do now? Spike dropping the S bomb on that one. And then I guess we'd be remiss by not mentioning that this is also the death of Starscream in the movie, which was kind of shocking to see as well.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you could say he died, but he kind of came back as a ghost. He never actually went away for long.
That's true. Wasn't it the death, the ghost of Starscream, where he was kind of haunting, was it Megatron, I think?
It was various Decepticons. He would Galvatron was around at the time, but he was like haunting, I think, Cyclonus or Scourge. I can't remember which.
And then, so we get to the end of the movie, then season 3 comes in, and this is for me when the wheels kind of come off the bus, because I was getting a little bit older at this point. I think Transformers was starting to wane a little bit more, and only because I had a really hard time connecting with season 3, and I don't know if it was just me, but I started to lose interest, and there was a lot of other things going on that were competing for my time growing up, much like everyone else at that time. But there was just some, like, I remember Carnage in C minor, which is an episode where there's a lot of singing. It just I didn't know what was going on there. Goldbug stood out for me from season 3, and we got the return of Optimus Prime, which was cool. Looking for that. And then I remember there was one episode, I think, where Stan Bush's The Touch came back in. I think it was probably at the very end, when there was like this plague or something that was.
Yeah, I think that was when Optimus Prime came back after. I think it was the hate plague.
Yeah, and he opens up the Matrix and
they actually
cures everybody.
They actually brought him back as kind of a zombie first, and then a few episodes later, they brought him back for real.
And then season 4, I have no idea what happened there. Like Headmasters, Target Masters, and Golden Age of Cybertron. I think this was the last. I remember having Six Shot. I think he was the last Transformer that I think I ever either owned or knew about. I don't even remember if I had the toy or not. Maybe I just imagined that, but that was the only thing I could even recall from season 4. And it was only 3 episodes compared to like all the other ones. Yeah. So was this at a time when they were just done, or they kind of packing it up? They were going on to the next phase kind of thing?
They were pretty much done in the US. It continued in Europe, or the toy line continued in Europe. Actually, the toy line continued in the US until I think the early 90s. But it was more, I think the comics lasted longer than the TV show, and then they stopped and then started back with Generation 2 for another year in like 91, I believe.
And SP, at this point, were you still hanging around or were you out?
I was watching the reruns when they came around, but no, I was out. I was probably in class at the time that there was some lab or something that it was airing. So I don't know if it was because like I had my fill of that sort of cartoon, or simply because I was running out of time, growing up, that sort of thing. The world though is huge, and I could definitely see multiple stories arising from the world. Jeremy's mentioned many times the comics. There's several lines of comics going on right now. I see them in the comic book store every week. I just haven't had the time to really pick it up and get into it, but it's a good IP.
Yeah. The continuity in the comics right now that IDW is pushing out is actually ending in the next few months. They have a Unicron event coming on right now that's gonna, when it's done, this 13-year continuity is gonna end, and we're assuming they're going to reboot everything at the beginning of the year.
Well, that would be par for the course for all of the comics out there. I mean, DC's recently had a couple of reboots, the most recent being Rebirth. Marvel has done several itself, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, it's a little different with licensed comics. And I don't know. On one hand, it's nice to be able to just say, okay, get, these 4 or 5 omnibus things and you got the whole thing. But yeah, it was a great continuity, and it is sad to see its ending.
Yeah, that sounds right for me to kind of jump back in, because I have been, apart from the rescue bots, I don't know that I've been really plugged in with what's been going on with Transformers, and I mean that seriously, because I've watched the rescue bots and I really enjoyed that cartoon. That's
better than it has any right to be.
Better than the GoBots, that's for sure. But I really enjoyed that. But apart from that, I don't know that I picked up some IDW comics back in probably early 2000s, mid 2000s when they were out. But I literally picked up a couple because the covers and the art were so cool. Never really picked anything up beyond that. So I haven't really been involved in any of that stuff, but the idea that Unicron's coming back, or and we're going to get a reboot of sorts, that kind of is appealing to me. I wouldn't mind jumping back in at some point to get reconnected with a lot of these characters. Am I getting too excited about that though?
No, I mean there are a lot of great stories. It's just a lot of it. I would recommend the Last Stand of the Wreckers, which is just there's like a Wreckers trilogy that is kind of self-contained. You don't really have to read anything else, and if you just want to see robot action, that's kind of what I recommend people do to get into it.
Yeah, and obviously there have been other cartoon series that have come out. We haven't even touched video games or any of that stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's out right now. But I do want to end maybe just on this last kind of question for you guys, and that really is, what is your favorite Autobot, Decepticon, and or other? And I'm sorry, SP, I'll start with you. Go ahead and give me your top picks for Autobot and Decepticon.
I would love to say Jetfire for Autobot, but
Skyfire. Jetfire.
Astro Train, it kind of fell apart after the toy. You never really saw the thing on TV. Yeah, Optimus Prime is definitely up there. Ironstide is pretty good. Bumblebee is, as a kid you connected with Bumblebee because Bumblebee was your gateway into the Autobots, the Transformers. So I think I'll have to go with Bumblebee. I mean, I haven't put much thought into it, but I mean, I know there's some amazing Autobots out there, but I'll go with Bumblebee. For a Decepticon, Starscream. I mean, he was whiny, he was devious, he was the right-hand man, he was a Jet. So yeah, I'll go. Yeah.
Cobra Commander.
Megatron tripped on a rock. Megatron has fallen. I'm the new leader.
Exactly. Every opportunity that guy could get, he would try to get in there. Do you have anybody else that just stands out for you?
Well, I mean, there's Grimlock, but I don't know if I was ever a fan of the dinosaurs, really. I mean, Grimlock was great, but
and he went on. What is the robot line that he made? Didn't he come up in one of the cartoons? Like he came up with and designed his own Autobots. What were they called? I forget their names.
They were the Technobots, I believe. It was like,
so yeah, he had a good hero's journey. Like he came a long way.
It was an episode where he was like made super smart, and then he sacrificed the smartness to put them into the other robots.
Yeah, and became dumb again.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for bailing me out on that one because I thought I was going down a limb by myself. All right. So Jeremy, how about for you, Autobot, Decepticon, and or other?
I would have to say Autobot. I mean, you can't really go wrong with Optimus Prime, and he is the one that I have probably more figures of anybody. And meeting Peter Cullen is just one of those moments that I can, mark off the bucket list. Yeah. So there's that. On Decepticons, I would probably have to say either Starscream or Soundwave, one of the two. I mean, they were both just so cool. And
Soundwave, always loyal.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that stuck out for me. He's always loyal to Megatron.
Well, yeah, and his characterization in the comics over the last couple of years has been phenomenal. And then on other, I will say Optimus Primal from the Beast Wars cartoon, which he was a Maximal, which is like the descendants of the Autobots. He turns in...
Was he a gorilla?
Yeah, he's a gorilla. He turns into kind of an Optimus Prime looking robot. And it was just, Beast Wars was such a well-written series. And I love the figure I have of him, and got to meet Gary Chalk, the voice actor, a couple of years ago. And it's great.
I'll give you mine real quick. Jetfire. I keep saying that because there's actually a joke there.
Yeah.
The toy was called, I'll probably get it wrong. The toy was called one thing, and then when he was in the cartoon, he was called something else, right?
Yes.
Is that the gist of it?
And we can thank Bandai again for that, because
for screwing that up.
It was the Robotech vehicle, and IP and licensing and stuff got in the way.
Yeah. Yep. In that episode is Fire in the Sky, and I just want to make this just real quickly. That episode is so cool because at one point he's a Decepticon, And when he finally turns to the Autobot sign, there's a scene in there where he rips off the Decepticon logo, throws it to the side, and then it cuts to him holding an Autobot logo that's glowing with like God's glorious light in the background, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then he slaps it on his chest, and now he's an Autobot. I remember as a kid, that was like, holy crap, we've got a flying, a ship now, or an aircraft on the Autobot side. So he always stuck out with me. But I'm with you there in terms of Optimus Prime. You can't go wrong. He is that father figure. He is, when I think of Transformers, he probably is the first thing that comes to mind. And then, he was kind of red, white, and blue. So all American
he was
guy.
John Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. He was very much like a John Wayne. For Decepticons, I'm going to go with Devastator, just because he was in that when you finally got to see him in season 1, it was just a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, it kind of shifted, threw you for a loop, like, whoa, there's not, again, like you said earlier, he can combine into all of these. And then my other is hands down Unicron, because he's just the look, that opening scene in the movie where he's just throwing the munch on a planet, right? And and the way that opening movie, the movie opens is just so awesome. But he's just, I think he's amazing. I think he's a great character. I've always loved him. And we won't get to what happened to the movies, and that was kind of thrown there as a joke. I don't think anybody really knows, and I'll take that as a fair answer.
Although, I believe that the last Knight is actually Travis Knight, because the Bumblebee movie is actually giving me a little bit of hope from what I've seen.
And me too.
Yeah.
I've seen the trailers, and it looks promising.
And he's a competent director.
I will never see another Michael Bay directed, produced film in the theater again after this debacle. He single-handedly took an amazing IP and really had good visuals, but he just did it poorly, and
he didn't treat the Transformers as actual characters.
Yeah. So I have noticed similar things in all of his movies, so I will never patron his movies in the theater by giving him the theater ticket movie. And may watch him at home, but I'm not going to watch him in the theater, which is a little bit unfortunate because he does have, like I said, good visuals, but I'm not giving him money after what he did here.
Well, and I want to go back to your we'll end it here, but I want to go back to your comment you just made right now where he didn't treat the characters the way they were supposed to.
Well, he didn't treat them as characters, in my opinion.
Right. No, and that's fair. I was just going to add, there's an episode in season 3 where the Transformers are in a movie. I don't know if you remember this one.
Hoist Goes Hollywood.
It's Hoist Goes to Hollywood, right? So they asked the Transformers to go be a part of Hollywood, and they get put in these roles, and they have to wear these masks, and they're not really centric to the movie at all that this director is making. And looking back now, I just think, I wonder if that was a prelude to what would come with the Michael Bay movies, because it was kind of the same thing.
I need to rewatch that. I haven't seen that in years, and
go check it out. You're going to be like, holy crap! They were foretelling what was about to come later down the road with the Transformers franchise. So, with that, I think we'll finally end this. Here we go, 2 hours and 25 minutes later. I apologize for anybody that's still listening. Let's end it here. SP, can you tell them where they can find you if they want to listen to more of what you've got going on?
Sure. You can find me at gonnageek.com. I'm on a variety of different podcasts there, one of which is the gonnageek.com show, where I talk about space stuff. I mean, real space stuff, not sci-fi stuff, although I do sprinkle sci-fi in there every week. That's once again at the gonnageek.com show at gonnageek.com.
Great. Thanks for being here, SP. And Jeremy, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for all of your Transformer knowledge and for doing these bloody homework assignments that I gave you. But where can the folks find you if they want to listen to more?
Transmissionspodcast.com is the main place. That we do 2 shows a week. We have the Transmission show, which focuses on the toys, and Transmissions Alt Mode, which focuses on comics and other media like the movies and cartoons and stuff. And you mentioned my Yakko Yak show. That's kind of like my playing around with podcasting thing where I just I'm trying to be consistent with that, but it's not working. But it's basically me talking mostly about DC Comics, and coming up, it'll be me complaining about Brian Michael Bendis.
I see you didn't follow SP's golden rule of podcasting. Only do 2 hobby podcasts a week.
Yeah, that's why he's got all that time. Well, yeah. So you don't talk about Animaniacs, I guess?
No, not really.
No. Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
okay, well,
it's just Yakko has been my handle since FidoNet days.
I got you.
So.
Yeah.
You just gave him
All right. Well, thanks
an
again
idea
for
for a new podcast.
yeah, right. I'm going to go hit that right now. All right. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We do have a Discord server that's available now. I'll start plugging that a little bit more here. But if you want to come in and talk a lot of 80s pop culture stuff, we've got channels for movies, music, serial, cartoons, whatever you want to talk about. We have a lot of fun in there. There's some great folks. And most of the podcasters that have been on the show are in there and drop in pretty regularly, believe it or not. So if you want to yell at them for something they said, you can do so there. So we'll end it there. Next week, or I guess on the next episode in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking Airwolf. We've got The Next Generation, Land of the Lost, HR Puffin stuff. For the movies, we're going to talk about Better Off Dead. We'll get some Journey in there, which I'm super excited about. And we'll get to talk about Def Leppard and a whole bunch of other stuff. So stay with us, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks. The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.